Chapter 1062. It sounded exaggerated, but when one thought about it carefully, it made sense. The stubborn High Elves attracted the Burning Legion in pursuit of greater power, and they called Sargeras God and Creator over and over again. They longed for self-evolution, longed for more power and power, but what did they get in the end? Apart from the most fanatical ones who followed Sargeras to become satyrs, the remaining High Elves were actually feeling uneasy and afraid. If it wasn't for Duque temporarily comforting them with the demonic crystals after Archimonde's arrival, perhaps guys like Dathrima would have split up earlier. In the original history, Queen Azshara had always foolishly believed, or perhaps hypnotized herself, that as long as Sargeras married her, everything would become perfect. In this way, she and her followers would be able to bear the consequences of the destruction of their country and territory. After all, if she became the mistress of the Burning Legion, she and the High Elves would obviously gain more. Unfortunately, this beautiful fantasy was mercilessly pierced by the cruel reality. None of the lords of the Burning Legion took the High Elves seriously. If it wasn't for Duque, the lords would even cruelly exploit them, making them work day and night to open the portal. In a sense, the relatively gentle Duque had become the last spiritual harbor of the Queen and the High Elves. It was a certain traitor with bad intentions who told the Queen the truth. The Legion would not look up to a weak race like the High Elves. Either they were more powerful than Eredar in magic, or they were comparable to the Lord of the Abyss in close combat. Since Sargeras betrayed the Pantheon 15,000 years before this point in time, and formed the Burning Legion to dominate the universe, it had been 15,000 years of history, and all kinds of powerful creatures had found their place in the Legion. Basically, there was not much hope for promotion. Only people like Duque who fought his way out could be promoted to a higher position. Just by selling beauty and a planet, she wanted to become Sargeras' wife. What a joke. Of course, Duque didn't tell the Queen directly. He leaked it to Celia when he was bored, like a slip of the tongue. Celia used to be the Empress's maid. She was here to bribe Duque and was also the Empress's spy. Duque was not worried that his words would not reach the Queen's ears. Duque was not afraid that the Gemini would find out and tell on him. After 15,000 years of continuous victories, the entire army was filled with absolute arrogance. Even the Gemini believed that the moment Archimonde arrived, the outcome had been decided. No one cared about the feelings of the High Elves and treated them like pebbles that could be found on the side of the road. Only the Highborn Elves thought that they were gems or something. Because what Duque had revealed was the truth, Queen could no longer deceive herself. She chose to stand up. Even if she had to threaten or make a deal to force Sargeras to marry her, she wanted to complete this political marriage. Of course, Duque was not the only one who made Queen Azshara step forward. Duque used the System Elf scan to find a well-hidden cultist among the High Elves. When it came to unscrupulous brainwashing, there was really no one better than that one. In the end, under the instigation of that one, Queen Azshara activated the inherent magic formation in the Forbidden Palace at such a perfect time and began to force Sargeras to abdicate. Wishes were beautiful, but reality was cruel. Who was Sargeras? Just because of a disagreement, he flipped over his boss's car and ran off to work alone. Then, as if he had too much on drugs, he casually killed hundreds of millions of creatures every few days. It seemed that such an existence would bow down to a mere elf? Then where would King Sargeras put his face in the future? Moreover, Azshara was not a beautiful orc with sexy fangs in her mouth. Her chest was as big as a coconut, her waist as thick as a bucket, and her butt was as hard as a rock. No way. Of course not. President Sargeras swore to die. His earth-shattering roar resounded throughout the world. Even the thick black clouds in the sky were shaken away. What a joke. No one has ever threatened me, Lord of the Burning Legion. Demon King Sargeras, not in the past, not now. Not in the future. Insignificant worm Azshara, are you ready to pay the price for offending me? Ha, ha ha, ha, Azshara laughed. Her staccato laughter gradually became maniacal. Everyone who heard Azshara's laughter could feel the ominous and hopeless tone in her voice. Far away in the twisting nether, Tyrant couldn't help but hug Duque's waist tightly. On the other side, Azhara had indeed fallen into some kind of extreme hysteria. Ha! Sargeras, for you, I am willing to go against the entire world. Now, all the gods and demigods in the heavens, as well as my people, want to tear me into pieces. You actually dare to tell me that I am threatening you by asking you to marry me? Ha! Ha! Actually, President Sargeras was also very bitter. Who knew that you, a nuisance queen, would marry him without even seeing him? The so-called sweetness, the so-called endless glory, were all things that you, Azhara, never agreed to. President Sargeras was also furious. His main body was still outside the spatial barrier, and he angrily tore at the spatial barrier while cursing. Azhara, just you wait, after I enter this world, the first thing I will destroy is you and your powerless and arrogant people. Sargeras, I won't give you this chance. Azhara picked up the demon's soul that guard Captain Verosin had handed over and raised it high. The next moment, as Azhara chanted a mysterious and evil spell, everyone realized that something was wrong. This is... Malfurion's whole body trembled. This was not any language that existed in the world. Tracing back, it could be traced back to the even crazier Dark Empire period. That was the terrifying era when the Kalandor continent was ruled by the believers of several ancient gods and elemental lords. Out of nowhere, a few consciousnesses descended. That's it. Well done. Azhara, you will receive a reward. This continent will be destroyed, we will be free, and a new order will be established on the ruins. You will become the unique queen of this planet. Malfurion's face turned green. Not good. It's the few ancient gods of Enzoth. With the ancient gods in hand, it was definitely not a good thing. No one had thought that the crazy ancient gods would actually want to blow up Kalandor so that they could escape the cage left behind by the creation titans. Chapter 1063. Evil light bloomed in Queen Azhara's hands. Beside her were her most loyal servants. They were all fanatics who were willing to sacrifice themselves for the queen. Now, they were also kneeling on one knee, watching the queen's actions with fanaticism. Ha! Perish! Sargeras, you ungrateful be***. I won't give you what I can't have. Azhara's once elegant face was now twisted with madness. The demon's soul in her hands had the most intense reaction with the well of eternity that originally belonged to her. The black well water suddenly shot thousands of meters into the sky. Azhara's city began to tremble. No, the entire Kalandor continent began to tremble as well. No, someone stop her. In the sky, the red dragon queen Alexstrasza screamed in fear. In the void, the moon goddess Ilun did not hesitate to use her divine power to attack Azhara's magic formation with the falling starlight. It was useless. The magic formation of Azhara had been in operation for countless centuries. With the support of the Well of Eternity, it could even withstand divine power, at least for a while. You'll regret this. Be***. In the distance, Sargeras was frantically tearing at the spatial barrier. He was speeding up to enter this world. The teleportation gate in the south of Azhara's forbidden palace had opened slightly, and a hole the size of a fist had appeared. The Demon King's terrifying aura was spewing out from inside. If they left it alone, Sargeras would be able to come out with time. At this moment, a slim female figure suddenly appeared behind Queen Azhara. Tyrant, who was watching the live broadcast in the twisting nether, exclaimed. Unexpectedly, Duque nibbled on Tyrant's earlobe and whispered, "She's my servant." A servant who seemed to have entered without permission had changed the entire situation. Queen Azhara would never have thought that someone would be able to sneak behind her even after she had sealed off the magic circle and isolated herself from the outside world. "Your Majesty!" The guard captain, Varlison, drew his sword decisively. He was half a step too slow. Vanessa snatched the demon's soul from Azhara's hand. She didn't attack Azhara directly because Duque had repeatedly told her that the queen's magical protective gear was terrifying. It was completely synchronized, and Azhara's magic circle actually had such a small gap. Everyone could see that Ronan was pressing something that looked like a pillar. The magic radiance spreading from his hand told everyone that this was his doing. Under the guidance of a certain traitor surnamed Du, Luo Ning effortlessly found the node of the magic formation that outsiders didn't know about and interfered with it. Vanessa threw Demon's Soul to Malfurion in the most glamorous way. Roddick, Alexstrasza, please lend me your strength. I might even have the chance to destroy the portal. Hurry, the chance is fleeting. Malfurion shouted. In the distance, the 4 dragon aspects, Luo Ning, Krasus, all the powerhouses of the allied army who could control their mana were offering their power. The colorful elemental light flew towards the tiny druid. At the same time, the lords of the Burning Legion also pounced over crazily, trying to stop Malfurion. All the powerhouses of the allied army, including Grom, pounced at the lords. They wanted to use their own bodies to stop the demon lord's interference. Everything was ready, and all they had to do was wait for Malfurion's final attack. If their last effort failed, none of them would survive. Malfurion's eyes flashed with the light of power. He directed everyone's mana towards the portal, where Sargeras had already dug a huge hole big enough for a Lord of the Abyss to pass through. Malfurion firmly believed that Sargeras, who was busy breaking the spatial barrier, didn't have the time to care about him. This made it possible to gather everyone's strength and take a risk. The mana of the powerhouses was too powerful, so powerful that Malfurion's mortal body couldn't withstand it at all. For a moment, Malfurion almost thought that his body was going to explode and die. However, it seemed to have sensed his will. This heaven and earth, this world, every creature, every plant began to lend their power to Malfurion. Silently, a pair of huge antlers grew out of Malfurion's head. It was the symbol of an envoy of nature, just like his master, the demigod Cenarius. They were extremely beautiful antlers. Malfurion felt that his mana had multiplied by who knew how many times in an instant. The enormous mana that had gathered in the demon's soul in his hand, which had almost crushed him and seemed as heavy as 1,000 pounds, was suddenly pushed forward. "Go back, Sargeras!" Malfurion roared, and an indescribably huge surge of mana shot towards Sargeras like lightning. Originally, they thought that Sargeras would be directly pushed back by this huge force. Everyone was wrong. The huge energy mass that was the size of a small mountain was actually blocked by Sargeras with one hand. Just the black gas on his hand was already stopping the energy mass from going any further. What was more terrifying was that the evil dark power started to envelop the energy mass. It wasn't hard to imagine that if Sargeras was given a few more seconds, all the efforts of the Azeroth heroes would be for nothing. No, almost everyone screamed in their hearts. Just then, a green figure fell into the portal like a meteor. The green figure was so inconspicuous that if they didn't pay attention, they would easily have missed it. In the next moment, everyone saw a shocking scene. Sargeras, the great demon, was actually injured, but only a small one. There was a shallow wound on his right leg. Krasus' sharp eyes recognized that it was caused by a large sword. It was Brock's blade of cataclysm. Every transmigrator's eyes were filled with bewilderment. None of this seemed to be possible. However, the magic sword that came from Archimonde's corpse 10,000 years in the future had really injured Sargeras. This top-grade greatsword had caused substantial damage and pain to Sargeras, who had an extremely high defense. Malfurion seized the opportunity when Sargeras was momentarily distracted. Explode! He easily detonated the energy. Finally, at the position of the portal, there was an earth-shattering explosion. Not just the portal. Even the branch of the Well of Eternity that was connected to the portal was affected. In less than half a second, even the entire Well of Eternity changed color. Not good. If this happens, not just the Well of Eternity, but the entire planet will explode. In the sky, Isera's face was pale. Chapter 1064. On Earth, in the era of the most serious confrontation, the most serious would be Old Sue and Old Me throwing bombs at each other, turning the Earth into a nuclear winter. In Azeroth, even if the Well of Eternity exploded, it would at most blow up the center of the ancient Kalimdor continent. But when the huge energy was mixed with the spatial barrier in the portal, it wasn't a simple matter of 1 + 1 = 2. Back then, the Titans of creation had put in a lot of effort to create this planet's spatial barrier. The spatial formation around Azeroth was not only a barrier that prohibited entry, but also a pillar that supported the planet's existence. It was like unscientifically taking the planet's core out of the atmosphere and wrapping it around the planet. If the planet's core was forcefully smashed from the outside, the planet would be finished. Of course, it wouldn't be so troublesome for the Burning Legion to just destroy the planet, but it would be much more troublesome to squeeze in and snatch the treasures inside. Malfurion detonated the huge ball of energy that crashed into the portal, causing the entrance of the huge vortex to tremble continuously. Then, it lost its internal strength, and the portal began to collapse. The edges of the portal that were burning collapsed one after another. As a fallen titan with supreme divine power, Sargeras still wanted to forcefully rebuild it with his powerful spatial magic. Unfortunately, it was too late. The situation had already gone out of control. Even with the power of the titans, there were times when they couldn't do anything. Brock's sword had stunned Sargeras for a full second. It was that precious second that had stolen the victory of the Demon King. Despicable ant. Under Sargeras's flames, the old orc, Brock, still smiling, was reduced to ashes. The long campaign had finally come to an end. The regret of not dying with his comrades had drawn a full stop on this ancient battlefield that had been 10,000 years since he was born. Brock, Grom cried, which was rare for him. Many of his comrades had died on the battlefield, but he didn't cry. Even when most believed that the tribe had perished, he didn't cry. But when this comrade whom he wasn't too familiar with, nor was he unfamiliar with, slashed out in order to save the world, the great Grom Inferno roared and cried. His lacrimal glands seemed to have collapsed, allowing tears to gush out of his eyes and mix with the blood staining his face, turning his face into a mess. Unfortunately, not many beings had the time to notice Master Roar's feelings. Because the situation was still very critical, Sargeras was unwilling to accept the fate of failure. He forcefully smashed open a part of the unstable space barrier and stepped out of the portal that was about to collapse. He wanted to force his way into Azeroth and repair it at the same time. His desire caused the spatial structure of the planet to become even more unstable. Just as the explosion of the portal began to spread, the Demon King found himself stuck in the portal, unable to escape. He couldn't escape, and he couldn't retract his leg. He threw away the sword in his hand and punched the entrance with his fists, but to no avail. The passage between the two worlds rapidly shrunk until he was sandwiched tightly in the middle. Sargeras roared, his voice reverberating in everyone's hearts. "I will not fail. Absolutely not." The portal kept shrinking, and Sargeras seemed to be shrinking as well. He tried his best to open the passage, and under his immense power, the inside of the portal started to catch fire, bursting out with an indescribably terrifying energy turbulence. At the same time, this also caused a terrifying tremor that affected the entire planet's crust. "We have to do something," Nozdormu roared. "We have to push Sargeras out, or he'll bring us down with him." Alexstrasza was like a madman, forcefully taking on the big moves of the three demon lords, and rushed towards the portal. Unfortunately, she was still too far away. Is this the end? Malfurion was the most desperate. In order to stop Sargeras from entering this world, he was the one who had detonated that ball of energy. Who would have thought that this was considered doing bad things out of good intentions? If Sargeras came in, the planet would be destroyed. If the portal exploded, the planet would still be destroyed. After working so hard for so long, this was the result of despair. Who could take it? At this time, many demon lords stopped, and so did the heroes of the Azeroth Coalition army. Everyone stared in the direction of the portal with the greatest fear and despair. They were waiting for the situation to change. If it really exploded, then everything they had done would be for naught. "No, Master hasn't done anything yet," Vanessa said. "Yes, Master loves to do big things." Ronan replied. "I don't want to admit it, but at a time like this, we can only rely on him." Even Krasis nodded. After spending so much time together, Malfurion knew very well that these mysterious powerhouses were all heroes with good hearts. They had the most noble sentiments and the most resolute will to fight. They could be said to be the most resolute and perfect comrades. The him they were talking about was naturally the Nothing who had helped Malfurion and imprisoned him. He was also the Dukong that Tyrant had mentioned later on. In the end, we still have to rely on that Dukong? Malfurion's mouth was full of bitterness. He thought of many things. He thought of the peaceful days in the past, and the time he had strolled in the lush garden with Tyrant. He couldn't help but think that his last hope had actually fallen on that mysterious Dukong. How laughable! So many mortals, so many powerhouses, even demigods and true gods, all wanted to break the shackles of fate and control it with their own power. But in the end, they could only rely on Dukong, who was hiding in the Burning Legion. Malfurion thought of the time when Tyrant cried and asked his trapped soul, "What should I do?" The helplessness of giving up on love still gnawed at his heart like a poisonous snake. "Bastard! I don't care if you're willing or not. You've already taken away my most precious thing, and the fate of billions of lives on this planet is in your hands. Don't disappoint us. Otherwise, even if we die, we'll curse you with the fiercest power possible." Malfurion thought back to Duque's pitch-black appearance and tried to convince himself to trust this mysterious and unreliable fellow. It was rare that even Malfurion the honest guy let out such a cry. Not to mention other existences. Who was it? It didn't matter who it was. Who could save Azeroth? Come quickly. This world is going to be destroyed. In the twisting nether, Tyrant was so shocked that she couldn't speak. At this moment, Duque suddenly grabbed her hand and smiled. "Did you know? The best singers are always the last to appear." Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, as the Demon King roared and hit the wall with all his might, a huge shadow of a black figure suddenly appeared above the portal. It was Duque in his shadow form. "Come back, Sargeras." The next moment, an irresistible suction force came from the other end of the portal and forcefully pulled Sargeras back into the portal. Chapter 1065. Master! Master! I knew it, bastard, couldn't you have shown up earlier? Vanessa, Ronan, Krasus, and Grom spoke in different tones, but they expressed the same meaning. The surrounding experts immediately realized who this black figure was. Could he be? Alexstrasza was stunned. "I'm afraid so." Izarin nodded lightly. According to the moon goddess Elun, these demigods all knew that there was a super spy in the allied army who had infiltrated the highest level of the Burning Legion. Although no one knew who this spy was, and no one knew what this spy could do. But in the end, at the most critical moment, the spy boss suddenly jumped out and set Sargeras up. This was really a big event that the allied army was happy to see. Sargeras used his sharp fingers to firmly grasp the unstable inner wall of the portal. Infernal affairs. Impossible. President Sargeras' eyes widened. He couldn't believe that the person who single-handedly sent Archimonde to Azeroth opened the portal to Azeroth for him, and did something that no Eridar warlock could do. A new Void Lord with a bright future would betray him at this time. Did the intelligence of the Titans drop after they fell? Idiot, you don't understand the meaning of the pseudonym of Infernal Affairs. Duque smirked. Illidan and Malfurion noticed that a few long strands of dark blue hair floated next to Duque's image. Was Tyrant beside him? The bitterness in the Stormwind brothers' mouths deepened. In the next second, Sargeras didn't disappoint the allied army. He roared and was forcibly sucked back. The portal that lost its support began to shrink rapidly. But this wasn't the end. The powerful spatial fluctuations caused by the big explosion just now showed no signs of subsiding. Just when everyone wanted Duque to do something, Duque didn't disappoint them. Things have gotten out of hand. Looks like Azeroth City can't be saved. Duque looked distressed. Even though Duque was talking about something terrifying, the faces of all the big shots of the allied forces were filled with unconcealable surprise. Previously, the planet could not even be saved. It could explode at any moment, and everyone would be wiped out. Now, they were only going to blow up as Hara? Is this for real? If this was the price they had to pay for this world-shaking battle, then wasn't this price too light? No one dared to say that Duque could or could not do it. Every big shot raised their heads and waited for Duque to make his move. In the distorted void, Duque turned around with a smile. "Oh, I told you that I would let you witness a miracle." Tyron still couldn't believe it. She felt like she was dreaming. How did the terrifying Sargeras get sucked back just like that? Du Kong isn't lying to me, right? It couldn't be a fabricated illusion, right? If these were all illusions, then weren't these illusions a little too realistic? Tyron suddenly realized that Duque was holding her hand and pressing a large blue button. Just now, Duque had pressed the leftmost button. This is the second button that will make the Burning Legion pay a heavy price. You've wronged yourself and sacrificed so much. Shouldn't you vent your anger now? Tyron was completely dumbfounded. She subconsciously chose to believe Duque, and pressed the button with her trembling hand. In Azeroth, although the Demon King had been sucked back, which was an unbelievable result, the crisis was still there. Either the following explosion would destroy everything, or the portal would remain open, and the Burning Legion and Sargeras would still have a chance to enter Azeroth again. Just then, the intense explosion that seemed like it was about to spread to the entire world suddenly stopped. There was a sudden deathly silence in the air, as if the entire world had become silent. The wind stopped, and even the water from the Well of Eternity that had almost reached the sky fell back down. There was no longer any sound. This strange scene made all the big shots of the allied forces look at each other. 3 seconds later, the roar of the wind resounded throughout the Well of Eternity, Azeroth, and even the entire Kalimdor continent. A seemingly chaotic gust of wind surged in the air. Even though it was turbulent, it had the power of a hurricane. Fortunately, Isra managed to dodge it in time. Like an apocalyptic storm, the wind blew violently. It was more violent than any hurricane that mortals had ever seen before. The giant dragons in the sky were caught off guard and were sent spinning in the air, flying around randomly, and even crashing into each other. Unexpectedly, they soon regained their balance. Only a few unlucky ones who collided with each other grimaced in pain, but this was nothing to the thick-skinned wyverns. More importantly, the wind just now seemed to have disappeared. The focus wasn't on the wyverns, but on the demons. The Doomsday Guards and all the flying demons couldn't escape this disaster. These winged demons couldn't control themselves in the air, and they couldn't do anything about the terrifying hurricane. A few demons crashed into each other, their skulls cracked and limbs broken. Many demons died just like that. But in the strong wind, their corpses didn't fall down. Instead, they spun rapidly on the surface of the Well of Eternity. It was as if a supergiant was drinking pearl milk tea, and these tragic demons were the so-called pearls. The next moment, the suction force suddenly increased 10-fold, then 100-fold. But to the giant dragons, this violent hurricane was like a summer breeze. They didn't feel anything at all. To their enemies, it was hell. They were in a mess. Tens of thousands of Doomsday Guards spun in the air, until the last one was mercilessly sucked into the portal. The big shots of the allied forces were dumbfounded. They never imagined that there was such a terrifying spell or some kind of device in the world, and that it was specifically used against demons. The demons that were still breathing wailed loudly, just like the screams of the weak creatures they had destroyed and slaughtered. But it was useless. They were like scraps of paper in a wild storm, unable to resist this terrifying storm. Not only the Air Force, but even the ferocious-looking demons on the ground were sucked into the portal from all directions. At first, it was the smaller ordinary demons like the Hellhounds, then the Demon Guards, and in the end, even the larger demons that weighed dozens of tons couldn't escape. The demons instantly rushed into the huge portal. In the eyes of others, their bodies began to distort and elongate like noodles. Finally, they became incomparably long, liquid-like things that were sucked into the portal. In the end, nothing could be seen. Chapter 1066. The terrifying suction force spread to the demon lord's body. Manarotha's movements started to slow down. He looked at an Eridar and realized that the same thing was happening to an Eridar warlock. The night elves didn't seem to be affected much, but their movements were getting slower and slower. What happened? He muttered to himself. Manaroth's tail hit the floor heavily, trying to resist this force. Just as he raised his hand that was holding the double-headed greatsword, his eyes suddenly widened. His scaly fur was now translucent. He could clearly see the muscles and bones in his body, and they didn't seem real anymore. Impossible, the Burning Legion's vanguard said in a booming voice. Absolutely impossible. A huge force pulled him up, and he felt like he was rising into the air like a balloon. Then, like a feather, he was sucked into the tornado-like crack in the portal. Near the city of Azhara, and even on the entire continent of ancient Kalimdor, every single soldier of the Allied army who was fighting a bloody battle was stunned to see this unbelievable scene in front of them. The demons that had been incomparably ferocious just a moment ago, wanting to tear apart everything in their way, were all sucked away. It was as if the enemies they had fought for months and sacrificed countless lives to resist were just a bunch of laughable illusions. Krasis, Malfurion, Alexstrasza, and even Elun, the goddess of the moon, who had sent down her divine will, asked the black figure standing above the crack in the huge portal. "What did you do?" "I just changed the incantation that Endzoth taught me, sucking away most of the creatures in Azeroth, and only sucking the demons into the twisting nether." Duque, who had just done something earth-shattering, seemed extremely calm. "You will pay the price. I'll remember you." The will of an ancient god flashed before disappearing. Almost everyone's heart skipped a beat. As expected, these evil fellows never gave up. However, to be able to change the incantation of an ancient god, where did this Dukong come from? One had to know that in this era, there weren't many existences who understood the ancient god's incantation, unless they were evil cultists hiding in the dark. Speaking of which, this guy really doesn't have any psychological burden at all. First, he sold out the Burning Legion, then the ancient gods. He was so daring and reckless. I really don't know how to describe this crazy and outstanding spy. At this moment, the teleportation gate was slowly closing. Unfortunately, the well of eternity that had calmed down for a while began to boil again. Duque said, "I'll leave this place to you. I need to work on the twisting nether." "What are you doing?" Isra asked loudly. Duque revealed the most mysterious and incomprehensible smile. "It's rare for me to have such a powerful weapon. How can I vent my hatred if I don't get rid of the Burning Legion?" "Don't worry, after this, I guarantee that the Burning Legion will not be able to invade Azeroth on a large scale for at least 10,000 years. 10,000 years? What kind of joke was this? Being able to maintain peace for 100 years was already a miracle. Moreover, the main force of the Burning Legion had only been forcefully dragged away, not destroyed. What right did this Dukong have to say such big words? Unless an idea that could not be any crazier began to emerge in the minds of all the experts. Could this guy be? They really wanted to imagine what Duque would do, but there was no time. A huge black light began to bloom on the Well of Eternity. A terrifying tremor that seemed to never stop spread in all directions along with the magic power of the Well of Eternity. Kaboom! With a loud noise, a huge crack at least 100 meters wide split the entire city of Azhara in half, and the huge crack was still showing signs of expanding. The powerful magic seal was still protecting the forbidden palace of Azhara, but no one knew how long it would last. Go! The giant dragons descended and rescued the heroes who had been fighting on the ground. "Where's Tyrant?" "Tyrant hasn't returned yet." Illidan yelled at his brother. Malfurion's body trembled. "I don't know, will he?" He was referring to was, of course, Duque. No one knew what Duque was going to do next. Sitting in the control room of the twisting nether, Duque gleefully tapped the beat and hummed an unknown tune. He sensed the situation outside and even had the mood to tease Tyrant. Tyrant was so scared that her heart almost jumped out of her chest. Even her body was trembling. "Don't worry. This is a super long-distance interstellar teleportation. Even Sardras, who was the first to come back, would need 5 minutes and 18 seconds. I also specially chose the slowest spatial tunnel for him. If I'm not wrong, he will come back with his subordinates. What if we're discovered by the demons here? Tyrant couldn't imagine how the hundreds of millions of demons here would react if they found out that she and Duque were doing this. It's fine. I've already secretly blocked all spatial communications here. I have enough time to do whatever I want. What was audacity? This was audacity to the extreme. Although every hero must have a big heart, but to have a big heart like Dooku, it was truly unheard of and unheard of. Tyrant felt a sense of excitement. It was a thrill that she had never felt in her thousands of years of life, from her childhood to her teenage years to her youth. Illidan was very good to her, and so was Malfurion. However, she had never felt such a taboo excitement from these two childhood friends. Ever since she was young, she had always followed the rules, listened to the sounds of nature, and followed the teachings of the goddess. She was the spokesperson of the goddess, the example of all that was good. She had never tried to play with the Burning Legion, who could destroy the entire world, in the palm of her hand. Walking on a tightrope on a mountain of blades. Dancing on the tip of a blade. Disco dancing at the gates of hell. There was nothing more exciting than this in the world. Her heart was racing, her adrenaline was pumping out adrenaline, and the endorphins in her brain were spreading joy. From the misery, grievance, and terror after being captured to the fact that the situation was about to turn around and they were about to successfully defend Azeroth and become a special existence beside the great hero of Azeroth, the complex emotions brought about by the ups and downs were indescribable. The more Tyrant thought about it, the more excited she was, and the more afraid she was. Unknowingly, all her thoughts and concerns were placed on this strange man who had once rudely dominated her, gave her despair, and gave her the greatest hope. We're finally at the last step. Duque laughed. Chapter 1067. On this day, in the super void fortress of the Twisted Nether, the demons were discussing the battle situation while waiting in boredom, as if they were celebrating a festival. I'm going to kill to my heart's content this time. This was what the cruel Dread Guardian said. I'm lacking some fresh experimental materials. Remember to tell the idiots below not to kill all the natives. This was what the evil Eridar Warlock said. No one expected that just as everyone was looking forward to a grand and magnificent victory, there would suddenly be movement in the incomparably huge circular teleportation portal. There was no air in the void, and there was no medium for sound to travel, so there was no sound. However, this scene made every demon who witnessed this scene feel like they were hallucinating. There was a loud bang in their heads. That was an uncountable number of demons. They were all the lucky ones in the eyes of other demons, lucky enough to be the first to rush to planet Azeroth. Now they were all back in the form of corpses. Most of these strong demons could survive for a long time even if they were thrown into the airless void, into the terrifying polar regions, or in lava. Some demons did not even need air to survive, nor were they afraid of high temperatures and flames. Now they were all reduced to dust. A hellhound's horn was pressed against the arm of a demon guard. The Abyssal Lord's belly button no longer had a shield-like waist plate hanging from it, but the skull of a female demon that looked like a specimen of Shivala. They were all torn to pieces and mixed into a ball, almost indistinguishable from each other. This is the Twisted Nether. A demon in the Void Fortress said the greatest fear in the hearts of the demons. Outside the Twisted Nether, no matter how many times they died, as long as their souls did not collapse, they could be resurrected countless times. However, dying in the Twisted Nether, like this kind of demon whose soul and body were sent back together, was dead. There was no possibility of resurrection. The huge teleportation portal formed by the 12 satellites as the fulcrum became a huge fountain, continuously spraying demon remains into the Twisted Nether. No one could estimate how many demons there were in this place. Obviously, this number was definitely in the hundreds of thousands. What happened? Jaden, who was in charge of guarding and dispatching reinforcements, rushed over when he heard the news. As soon as he flew out of the Void Fortress, he saw a large piece of trash being spat out by the portal along with hundreds of larger pieces of trash. The Archherons and Void Dukes were different from ordinary demons. Although they were in a sorry state, they didn't suffer too much damage. Archimond? Kil'jaeden's eyes lit up. He finally met someone he could talk to. What happened? If the low-level demons below died, then so be it. In any case, there were so many of them. It wouldn't hurt even if thousands of them died. But it was different for demon lords and Archimond commanders. Even if he wasn't on good terms with Archherons, in terms of overall interests, Kil'jaeden was still in line with Archherons. When the magical Eridar language reached Archimond's ears, he was still confused. I don't know either. I just fought on the front lines. There was a guy who looked like a white deer who was very powerful. It took me a lot of effort to barely defeat him. All of a sudden I was pulled back. At this time, Kil'jaeden, who had regained his senses, remembered that there was someone else he could ask about this situation. That was the high-tier Void Lord in charge of the portal. His thoughts were immediately interrupted, because Sargeras had actually returned. His huge body was almost forcibly squeezed out of the portal. The melted armor covered the fallen titan from his neck to his feet. Sargeras's entire body exuded a black, violent magic. This magic was shockingly powerful. Just looking directly at it would be enough to stab one's eyes and cause pain. In the void control room, Tyrant endured the pain and bravely looked at Sargeras's evil face. It was a face that was twisted and perfect. About 15,000 years ago, Sargeras was still a handsome, almost perfect being. Through Elun, Tyrant learned that the race of this creature was the one who created this world. But now, this handsome face was filled with evil. His body was already dead, and his eyes were burning with flames. He was in an extremely chaotic state of emptiness. Sargeras had sharp, poisonous fangs. He waved a long and thick tail behind him, and jagged scales protruded from the tip of the tail. His hands were curled with demonic claws, and he held an evil sword in one hand. Perhaps it was because of the explosion of the portal just now, only half of the sword was left. However, its serrated blade still looked very lethal. Infernal affairs. You traitor! You still have the guts to stay here? Sargeras's roar set the tone for this strange turn of events. Kil'jaeden and the Eridar twins who were floating in the air turned pale. If Infernal Affairs was really a traitor, then they would also be in trouble. How terrifying was the voice of the fallen titan. Even though they were at least 10,000 meters away, Duke and Tyrant could still feel the terrifying pressure. It was as if stars were crashing into them. If not for Duke blocking the attack for Tyrant with a wave of his power, Tyrant might have died on the spot, her organs exploding into smithereens. With a thought, the dark energy in Duke's body activated a small spell. Suddenly, an illusory projection of Sargeras' size appeared in the void. Over 1 billion demons heard Duke's voice, which was formed by dark energy waves. Ha! Sargeras, why don't you ask me why I'm still here instead of hiding like you think I am? Duke's calmness made the Burning Legion's triumvirate uneasy. This Infernal Affairs was too scary. He snuck in silently, and like the other lords, accepted the ultra-high purity of dark energy baptism, but kept his heart. He passed all the tests, and with his unparalleled spatial magic, he climbed to the top of the Burning Legion. Why hadn't he left yet? The answer was simple. He must have something up his sleeve. Let me tell you now, why did I name this portal Mjolnir? Duke's face was dyed with black energy, and a smile that was terrifying even to a demon appeared. Chapter 1068. I don't care what you're up to. Everything is over. You can't betray the Legion just because you want to. Pay the heaviest price for your sins. Following Kil'jaeden's domineering words, the image of something in Kil'jaeden's hand was magnified many times. It was magnified to the point that even Duke and Tyrant, who were thousands of meters away, could see it clearly. It was a lifelike black, translucent humanoid spirit. On the spirit body, a black robe wrapped around this slender and slightly demonic body. It posed in a handsome pose, its face full of complacency, evil, and mysteriousness. Tyrant exclaimed. She knew what it was. It was Duque's soul. Not good. Tyrant was not an ignorant woman. As the high priestess of the moon goddess, she had more opportunities to come into contact with information about demons, killing, destroying, devouring bodies, and even souls. Souls were the last thing that demons could get their hands on. Once one's soul was controlled by a demon, whether it was turned into a disgusting and indescribable existence or destroyed completely depended on the demon's preferences. Duque tilted his head slightly and explained to Tyrant, "If I want to become a Void Lord, how can I not give up a part of my soul? Otherwise, the leader of the Burning Legion would not have given me such an important task." Tyrant's heart felt as if it had fallen into the deepest and darkest hell of despair, and there was no longer any warmth in her. The hatred and resentment that Duque had towards her for everything that he had done to her disappeared at this moment. Even though he knew that he would probably die, and even his soul might fall into hell and suffer for billions of years, he still gave the Burning Legion the most tragic counterattack. This kind of heroic spirit was not something that mortals could imagine or even compare to. What was greatness? This was greatness. What was a hero? This was a hero, even though Illidan and Malfurion were outstanding heroes. Compared to what Duque had done, their actions were insignificant. Looking at the only white eyes in the darkness, Tyrant felt as if she had stopped breathing and her heart had stopped beating. Even time seemed to have stopped for a moment. "Are you telling me that if you die, I have to complete the last step for you?" Tyrant followed Duque's gaze and saw the third button. It was a red button with a warning tone. "So, you've already prepared everything? Is that the final button that allows you to continue the plan even if your soul collapses?" Duque's lips curled into a smile, but Duque's smile froze in that instant. This was because Kil'jaeden had already crushed Duque's soul avatar in his rage with a palm covered in hellfire. "Ah!" Duque screamed and knelt down on the spot. Sargeras let out a sinister laugh that shook the entire distorted void. "Infernal affairs, don't think that death is the end. This is just the beginning." Sargeras was furious. The grand plan that he had been planning for so long had been ruined by a small traitor. He couldn't even wait for Duque to die. With a wave of his hand, he snatched Duque's soul from Kil'jaeden's hands and gave him the most terrifying soul punishment. That's right. Just like how he had done the soul punishment hundreds of thousands of times before, he only had to activate the spell and he could use this part of the soul that had been processed by a secret spell to pull over Duque's entire soul. Then he could. Tyrant's entire body trembled. She didn't know how painful the soul punishment was, but she had heard the cries of her sisters who had died in the hands of Eridar's Gemini. None of the physical punishments in the world could make people cry out in despair like that. She wanted to say that she could imagine what kind of pain it was, but she couldn't lie to herself. Looking at the trembling Duque, who was sweating profusely, she shouted in her heart, "Tyrant! There's no time to be weak. Don't let Duquang's efforts go to waste. For Azeroth. For the goddess. And even more for Duquang. You have to be strong. Tyrant." Tyrant couldn't care less about Duque beside her. She used all her courage and strength to pounce forward like a cheetah and hit the last red button with her fist. With the press of the button, the 12 satellites suddenly rotated, and after countless teleportations, the magic power accumulated in the satellites burst out at this moment. They were arranged according to the time of the clock. The next moment, the magic on all the satellites gathered at the center point. When the 12 white-hot light beams gathered into one, it released a dazzling light that was as dazzling as the birth of a new star. A thick energy cannon was shot out. From afar, it looked like a solid object. In less than 1,000th of a second, the terrifying high-energy cluster covered the distance of more than 10,000 meters and pierced into the base of the Burning Legion, the void fortress that was generally prismatic and built from the inside out of a giant meteorite. As the base of the Burning Legion for more than 10,000 years, the surface of the fortress was mostly covered with precious metals such as krypton gold. The interior was constructed with an unknown alloy that had been treated with high magical protection. In fact, most of the defensive walls inside the fortress were handmade from the remnants of the interstellar battleships that Sargeras had stolen from the Pantheon. But even with the outer layer of super hard metal and the inner wall made from the interstellar battleship shell, it still failed after resisting for a few seconds. The light beam pierced through the fortress's anus and reached the interior. All the huge compartments along the way were instantly set ablaze due to the void extracting oxygen and air. The explosion was extinguished in an instant. Small white light bubbles quickly appeared and extended to the area near the damaged area. In all fairness, the power of this cannon was not small. It was enough to withstand the energy waves caused by hundreds of interstellar battleships exploding at the same time. This meant that in that instant, the Void Fortress had lost tens of thousands of demons. Sargeras didn't care. Compared to the Burning Legion, which had hundreds of millions of soldiers, the loss of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, or even tens of millions would not affect the Burning Legion's foundation. However, being hit in the fortress's central warehouse where the demonic crystals were stored would cause an explosion that could affect the entire Void Fortress and destroy the billions of demons within it. That was another matter altogether. Chapter 1069. Dark energy had never been a stable and peaceful energy. High-purity dark energy crystals that stored large amounts of dark energy were even harder to deal with. The dark energy obtained after destroying countless planets and slaughtering billions of lives was good stuff, but with the Burning Legion's half-baked science, all the demonic craftsmen could think of was to gather the dark energy, separate it into compartments, and store it away from the outside world as much as possible. Who would have thought that once it was hit by high energy, the dark energy crystals would become a more terrifying existence than a nuclear bomb? A super explosion that no one could have imagined happened. The Burning Legion's triumvirate turned their heads and looked at everything before them in horror and despair. The colossal fortress that they had operated for a full 15,000 years, the Void Fortress that was as big as a planet, and who knew how many billions of demons had been stuffed into it. At this moment, as the explosion spread throughout the entire fortress, one could see terrifying bulges that looked like blisters and lumps on the surface of the fortress. No sound could be heard in the void, but that was what their nerves told the triumvirate. Expand, expand, expand again. Anyone could see that the Void Fortress was done for. 3 long yet brief seconds passed, and the entire fortress burst into the brightest green light. In the next instant, the green light that seemed ready to extend infinitely retracted, forming a black hole that devoured life, matter, and everything around it, even light. No, Sargeras let out the most miserable scream he had ever let out since he fell. Ever since the Pantheon's rebellion, his 15,000 years of hard work had been destroyed in his lair. Tyron stared blankly at the scene on the holographic screen. She was crying, and 2 streams of tears had uncontrollably dyed her face red. She was laughing, because she suddenly felt that the burden on her shoulders since the Burning Legion's invasion had vanished. At the same time, she had accomplished everything she had to do. Dukong, do you see that? I fulfilled our wish. The Burning Legion has been dealt a heavy blow. We've succeeded. I'm here to accompany you now. Perhaps we will suffer eternal torture together. But I don't care as long as I'm with you. At the last moment, Tyrant thought of the Storm Rage brothers, but she quickly pushed them out of her mind and turned towards Duque like a moth to a flame. Turning Duque's body over, Tyrant began to rain kisses on Duque's face like a madwoman. She didn't know when the Burning Legion's Big Three would come to deal with her, but she didn't expect to return to the forest that gave birth to her. She wanted to seize the last chance to be intimate with Duque. At this moment, a scare happened. Duque suddenly grabbed her waist and scolded, "Stupid woman! Stop kissing me! You're hindering my spell casting." Casting spells? What spell? Tyrant, who was in a state of confusion, asked subconsciously. Duque cursed, "Of course it's to open a portal and run away. If we don't run after acting tough, are we going to wait for the 3 heavyweights to kill us? What's wrong with you?" Tyrant was extremely shocked, and then ecstatic. She wanted to ask Dukong why his soul wasn't taken away. "Let's run first." Duque jumped into a portal with Tyrant in his arms. On the other side, The Burning Legion's big three also realized that something was wrong. Oh no. Impossible? How could he? By the time they wanted to stop it, it was already too late. Firstly, they were caught off guard. Secondly, the space around them had already started to shatter. Thirdly, in terms of spatial magic, none of them could compare to Duque. The three of them, who could destroy a world with just a raise of their hands and feet, could not do anything. They could only watch as Duke, whose soul should have been shattered and whom they could do whatever they wanted to him, jumped up and ran away with the girl. He ran away. That's right. He really ran away. Sargeras, Archimonde and Cultivation let out furious, heart-wrenching, and abnormally twisted roars at the same time. None of the Void Lords dared to go near the three heavyweights. They were afraid that they would be destroyed if they offended them. The Eridar twins were terrified as they hugged each other and trembled. They knew that since the infernal affairs had run away, someone else would have to take the blame. They had single-handedly selected the infernal affairs, so they had no way to escape. In the void, everything around them was strange and blurry. Images that had been distorted by time and space rushed towards them at high speed, and then were thrown far behind them. She hugged Duque tightly, feeling Duque's warmth and heartbeat. Tyron didn't dare to do anything drastic, because interstellar travel was a very dangerous thing. If she didn't die in the distorted void after completing such a feat, it would be a joke if she ended up hanging in a spatial crack somewhere in the universe. How did you avoid the soul punishment? Unable to suppress her curiosity, Tyron chose to ask the question that had been in her heart for a long time. My soul is a little special. Once I lose it, it has nothing to do with the core of my soul. That's possible? Tyron was a little shocked. The universe is very big. Anything can happen. Yeah. Tyron didn't ask any more. She quietly rested her head on Duque's chest. How did Duque avoid the soul punishment of Cultivation? Don't forget, Duque was the one and only person in this world who could resurrect himself. His soul was the most special existence. Every time he died, Duque would lose his soul and humanity. Once his soul left Duque, it would be like losing his moral integrity. It would have nothing to do with Duque anymore. Would a person who was used to having his soul deducted for a long time, and who could do good deeds, fuse with or inherit the soul, integrity, of a saint really be afraid of soul damage like normal beings? Stop joking. Even Duque himself didn't know how much of his soul was originally his after inheriting Medivh and Alonsis Fail's moral integrity. How long had passed? Tyron didn't know either. She just realized that she was enjoying the process of being alone with Duque. There was no more responsibility or terrifying threats. There was only peace and security. How she wished that this kind of time could continue endlessly. Unfortunately, after a series of rumbling sounds, Tyron suddenly realized that she and Duque had returned to Azhara City. However, it was Azhara City that was on the verge of destruction. Even though Duque had absorbed most of the power of the Well of Eternity when he sucked Sargeras away, the destruction still continued. It was just that it was slightly less than expected. Stepping out of the teleportation gate, Duque was a little stunned. He saw a familiar face not far from him, looking at him in shock. Silea Ubatilia. Chapter 1070. Outside the side hall that Duque had once stayed in, a violent gale was howling incessantly, and thunder rumbled incessantly. However, the side hall that had been secretly solidified by a certain person with a magic seal seemed to be the only safe island in the whirlpool of despair that was the Well of Eternity. Ever since he descended into this world, Duque had not had the chance to go anywhere other than the twisting Nether and Azhara City. He was no longer a mage, so he could only use the space magic array that he had asked the warlocks of Eridar to prepare in advance to teleport. Setting the space seat here was a last resort. However, Duque did not expect that this elf maid, who was once tied up by the queen and could be stripped naked with a pinky, would appear here at this time. It was hard to describe the look in Silegia's eyes. Was it guilt? Fear? Longing for redemption? Or asking for pity? He did not know. It was probably all kinds of emotions, but they were all mixed up in her eyes. Even though the surroundings were noisy, Xianxia could clearly hear the sigh that came from Duque's lips. Sigh. An invisible and untouchable barrier appeared between their hearts. There was no word, but Duque's eyes said, "I gave you a chance." Duque had tested her before. If this woman, whom he named Xianxia, could keep all of his secrets, he would use other channels to let Queen Azhara know about the ancient gods. It was a pity that Xianxia had always played the role of a spy here, just like what he had done in the Burning Legion. Duque was not a fickle person. If he were to abandon her like this, he would not be able to forgive himself. Seeing that Xianxia had served him and Tyrande diligently, Duque taught her many things, such as the creation of magic circuits, the use of nature magic, and a few inconspicuous spells that would soon become very important to her. However, this was the limit. Looking at Duque, who no longer had a dark aura around him and was instead glowing with a gentle golden light, it was clear to Celia that Duque was a member of the Allied army. His entire body trembled violently, and his mouth squirmed for a long time, but not a single word came out. However, the pleading look in his eyes became even more intense. Sure. She still wanted to beg Duque to bring her along. Duque shook his head decisively. Everyone has to be responsible for their own actions. No matter what my identity is, since you chose to be loyal to your empress and didn't swear to be loyal to me from that moment onwards, the result is already set in stone. Ignoring Xianxia, who was kneeling on the ground and crying, Duque led Tyrande up to the balcony on the second floor. Suddenly, Celia's voice came from behind Duque. "If fate allows me to choose again and I choose you, will you accept me?" Duque stopped in his tracks. As a transmigrator, he knew very well what was going to happen next. Was it fate? Was it a coincidence? Or was it a prank? Even Duque himself didn't know why he did this. He smiled. His smile was mysterious and filled with certainty. "Do you still remember the first spell I taught you?" Celia, who had already given up all hope, suddenly raised her head and nodded vigorously as if she had found a life-saving straw in her most desperate moment. Her eyes were filled with tears. It was unknown whether they were tears of regret, desire for redemption, or both. Duque said leisurely, "Not everyone has the right to stand by my side. Back then, I entered the Burning Legion with the determination to endure 10,000 years of torture. If you have the courage and perseverance, when we meet again, I will accept you as my maidservant." Duque left. He left in a carefree manner. He didn't take a single cloud with him, but he also left a bitter maidservant behind. He didn't know if this would become an ill-fated relationship, but at the very least, Duque had no regrets. He didn't owe Xianxia anything. Walking up to the balcony, they heard a deafening rumble. Even Duque felt a little scared, let alone Tyrande. "Look," Tyrande whispered into his ear, "Azhara City." They looked into the distance. What they saw was a terrifying scene. The ground of Azhara City had been split in half. The core of the city had fallen into a huge canyon that was at least a few kilometers deep. The entire inner city was sliding towards the Well of Eternity, and the city was surrounded by water. Only by craning their necks to the highest point could they see the huge waterfall that seemed to reach the sky. Azhara City was in the middle of a huge whirlpool of water. The Well of Eternity was dragging the nearby ground towards its deep hole, as if it was going to swallow the whole of Kalimdor. Azhara City floated on the black water, and the isolated island floated up and down like the wreckage on the water's surface. The funny thing was that the Elven Palace was still standing there, almost undamaged. As Azhara City neared the center of the whirlpool, ominous lightning flashed around the city. Unlike most of the things that left Kalimdor, Azhara City was heading straight for the center of the lake. Duque felt Tyrande's grip tighten. She hugged Duque's waist tightly, as if she wanted to melt her soft and elastic body into Duque's. Duque wasn't worried about his own safety. His entire body was emitting a pure golden holy light, as dazzling as a lighthouse in the dark. No matter what the reason was, as long as the leaders of Azeroth wanted to know what had happened in the Twisting Nether, they definitely wouldn't let Duque die so easily. Moreover, he was hugging the high priestess of the moon goddess Elune. There was no need to call for help at all. For huge figures of different colors rushed out of the clouds at high speed, falling straight down. The Dragon Kings descended rapidly from the sky and hovered in the air. This was the flying ability of the Dragon Kings. Alexstrasza, Maligos, Isra, and Nozdormu, the 4 Dragon Kings surrounded the side hall next to the forbidden palace of Azhara. The Red Dragon Queen stretched her long dragon neck. "There's no time. Quickly ride me." Duque smiled and hugged Tyrant. He turned around and rode on the back of the most respected Dragon Queen in the world of Azeroth. The 4 Dragon Kings flapped their wings and stirred up a gust of wind, even blowing away the ominous storms and lightning around them. Sileka's lonely figure stood at the top of the stairs, watching as the Dragon Kings climbed up quickly. Duque turned into a small dot and completely disappeared from her sight. Chapter 1071. Sitting on the throne in the Forbidden Palace, Azhara's face lost all its color. "It's over," she murmured. "Everything is over." Azhara's maids screamed wildly around her. The queen held an empty wineglass in her hand, unwilling to believe what had happened. She was Azhara, the brightest light. She was the light, and the light was her. She was her, the supreme ruler of her people. Even though she knew that destruction was right in front of her, she still stubbornly told herself that she would never allow such a thing to happen. Sargeras refused to marry her. She was just a pitiful creature that was abandoned after being used. Perhaps many of her followers saw this humiliating scene, but she still didn't want to admit to them that she was wrong. She abandoned her people, and in the end, she was abandoned by the god that she worshipped. How ironic was this? How bitter was this? The rumbling sound of destruction grew louder and louder. The palace, which had sunk to the bottom of the water, began to be shrouded in darkness. Even the night elves' dark vision couldn't see through it. The only light in the palace came from the violent power of the Well of Eternity. The dark lake water began to surge into the palace, washing away her 2 maids. The maids let out shrill screams and quickly disappeared into the lake water. "I am Azhara," the queen muttered in her heart, her expression still cold. She cast a spell, and a magic shield suddenly appeared around her and the living maid beside her. "My wish is the highest." She used her powerful magic to block the lake water, but as the water got deeper, the pressure on the magic shield increased. Azhara's brows furrowed, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. This was the first time in her life that she had sweated. At this moment, the familiar and disgusted voice in the darkness whispered to her, "I have a way to make you stronger, stronger than before. We can help you." The queen wasn't stupid at all. Especially when a woman had just woken up from a dream of love, this woman was definitely at the smartest moment of her life. She knew that her shield wouldn't last long. Soon, the cold water would swallow her and her followers, and the glory of Azhara City would disappear from this world forever. The silver-haired elf queen nodded. Accompanied by a scream, the glass fell from her hand. Pain shot through her body. She felt her limbs twisting and entwining. She could also feel her back turning into liquid, as if it had suddenly melted. Her magic shield was obliterated. Azhara screamed in despair as she was drowned by the lake water. She could also hear other people's voices coming from the depths of the lake. Her maids, her guards, and other highborn elves who still served her. The lake water quickly filled her lungs, but she did not drown. Riding Alexstrasza, Duque watched from the sidelines as the city that symbolized the highest arcane civilization of the Night Elves was sucked into the center of the giant whirlpool. Duque didn't know whether he was following history or changing it. For a moment, he even had the mischievous thought that if Azhara City could be blown into pieces before it sank to the bottom, a new masterpiece would be born. Unfortunately, since he dared to attract the ancient gods and even used Queen Azhara to trick Sargeras, then the ancient gods that joined him, such as Enzos, would definitely not let Queen Azhara and her followers go. It was very likely that after a few centuries, a new horror would be born under the sea. Duque shifted his gaze away from the center of the Well of Eternity. Witnessing the standard world-shattering disaster quickly dissipate in all directions, Lin Feng's eyes widened in shock. Large pieces of land on the ancient Kalimdor continent were still being pulled into the lake, and the power of the horrifying scene didn't diminish at all. It looked like a domino effect. The land kept falling, and the horizon kept expanding. The only fortunate thing was that because the Burning Legion was massacring with Azhara City as the center, all the creatures in the vicinity had basically run away. Otherwise, it would have been another large-scale massacre, and Duque might have felt a little guilty. What a pity! Mountains were uprooted one after another. Large tracts of land split open in the raging whirlpool, and then disappeared into the center of the whirlpool. Sitting on the Red Dragon Queen and looking down, Duque saw the land where the elves lived disappear without a trace in the blink of an eye. No power could withstand the destructive impact of the Well of Eternity. Perhaps to nature, even the bloody massacre of the Burning Legion was nothing. After all, what the Burning Legion did couldn't compare to what was happening now. Beyond his reach, the wheel of history still followed its inherent inertia and continued to move forward. Without the influence of external forces, everything was inevitable. A red dragon approached his queen at high speed. Ronin sat on a red dragon and waved his arms vigorously. Seeing that his master was safe and sound, he was very excited. Master Kong. Ronin, who was still very innocent, almost let it slip. Duque rolled his eyes at him. A few more dragons came over. Grom clearly saw Duque and then, he snorted and turned his head away. No one knew if he was sulking because he couldn't repay the favor, or if it was something else. Krasus also came with a smile. On the other hand, Vanessa, the maid with a belly full of evil tricks, didn't say anything, but when Duke looked at her, this bad maid, who often challenged her master in all sorts of ways, looked at Tyrande in Duque's arms. Her face was full of mockery, and she actually mouthed a few words to Duque: bird, beast, baron. No, no, no. The wind must be too strong, and my eyes must be playing tricks on me. Confess and be lenient, and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. As an honest and reliable young master, how could Du Moke admit to such a thing? It must be an illusion. This is definitely the world's fault. Ha! In the distance, the outline of Mount Hyjal appeared on the horizon. Looking down from the sky, Duque could see the main force of the night elves moving toward Mount Hyjal. Their blue-purple figures were easy to recognize. Behind them, the waves of destruction were still far behind them, seemingly chasing them closely. Tyrande suddenly became nervous. She asked Duque, "My compatriots, will they escape?" Duque looked at the ground, and the system elf quickly compared the surrounding environment with the geography of 10,000 years in the future. If he didn't make a mistake, this would already be the territory of Du Roder in the future. Fraud Duque was very sure. It's okay, the disaster won't reach here. Chapter 1072. Duque's words sounded more like some sort of subconscious comfort, but Tyrande believed him without a doubt. Tyrande no longer had any doubts about Duke's abilities as he was able to teleport the two of them back before the Burning Legion's 3 leaders could regain their senses and go on a rampage. If Duque said it was fine, then it was fine. Her heart, which had just started to waver, quickly calmed down. Mount Hyjal was getting closer and closer. As another base of the Night Elves' nature faction, Tyrande felt reassured every time she came to Mount Hyjal. Suddenly, Tyrande heard the goddess's voice. "My child, you've worked hard. Can I trouble you to persuade your companion to come to Mount Hyjal?" Tyrande hesitated when she heard this. She had heard from Malfurion about a few mysterious powerhouses. Including Du Kong beside him, there were a total of 3 humans. These were humans who were completely different from the humans of Kalimdor. They were powerful, mysterious, proficient in all kinds of spells, and had battle techniques that even the best night elf thieves could not master. No one knew where they came from. When they were dealing with the Burning Legion, they obviously had a common goal and naturally formed an alliance. But what about after that? Goddess Elune is looking for you? Duque suddenly asked Tyrande after sensing the goddess's power. Yes, If you don't mind, the goddess hopes that you can go to Mount Hyjal. Tyrant asked carefully. In her days, she seemed to have become that helpless slave girl again. Duque laughed. Just nice. I also have something to ask Goddess Elun for help. Since both sides had the same wish, it was easy. Tyrant heaved a sigh of relief and continued to sit behind Duque. She hugged Duque's waist and pressed her Mount Hyjal against Duque's back, just like she had done in those days when she needed comfort the most. Unbeknownst to Tyrant, a few hundred meters behind her, a pair of brothers were staring at her from atop two dragons. Illidan shouted in his heart. It can't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. Tyrant is mine. At the very least, she would be Malfurion's. How could a jerk suddenly appear and take her away? These voices lingered in Illidan's mind, telling him of the unimaginable. Yes, there was a time when he was jealous of his brother, but he couldn't imagine doing anything that would hurt Malfurion, such as cutting off his left arm. But at such a time, he could not control his thoughts, and felt that this unthinkable thought of his was somehow a comfort to him. If the one who stole Tyrant was her brother, at least the pain of losing her would be slightly alleviated. Deep in his heart, Illidan still hoped that Tyrant would turn back and abandon the human spy who had once served Kil'jaeden. Perhaps there was still a glimmer of hope. Given time, Tyrant would realize that the two of them were more outstanding than the infernal affairs, and he was more outstanding than his elder brother. Perhaps to many couples, Tyrant's current actions were undoubtedly the greatest betrayal of their feelings. Perhaps, many men would turn their love into hate because of this. But at this moment, Illidan, who was wearing a green turban, and his elder brother, Malfurion, who was wearing the traditional green hat of the Druids, looked at each other and saw that they did not regret their choice. Of course, he chose to forgive her. As childhood sweethearts, this was an inevitable choice, however. Compared to his elder brother who was prepared to do nothing, Illidan had a more radical approach. He secretly pinched his chest, where there were a few bottles of well water from the Well of Eternity. This was not the water that flowed into the magic vein and was diluted by the river water. This was the purest well water from the Forbidden Palace of Azhara. If I do something like this, Tyrant will definitely look at me differently, Illidan silently told himself. Dragons were the fastest flying creatures in this era. Not long after, the 4 Dragon Kings arrived at the peak of Mount Hyjal. It was only when the magnificent temple of the Moon Lady entered her vision that Tyrant realized that she had returned to her own life. That's right. Unless the goddess changed her mind, she would once again become the beautiful high priestess of the temple of the Moon Lady that countless people looked up to and worshipped. Tyrant, high priestess. Tyrant could already hear the cheers of the Elun sisters below. She awkwardly shifted to keep her distance from Duque and waved to the sisters. As they got closer and closer to the ground, Tyrant subconsciously felt a little timid. She had no idea how to tell her sisters about her experiences over the past few days. She did not know what the goddess of Elun had told her sisters, but it seemed that the sisters did not have a bad impression of her because she had been captured by the demons. Instead, their eyes were filled with fanatical worship. Tyrant did not have time to ask, because after she and Duque were put down, the 4 Dragon Kings quickly transformed into their human forms. They urgently needed a meeting to understand the situation of the Burning Legion. Alexstrasza walked at the front, followed by the 3 Dragon Kings, Duque, and finally Tyrant, Ronin, and the other transmigrators who walked behind Duque. Many ancient dragons also turned into human forms and guarded the perimeter of the Temple of the Moon Lady, preventing anyone from getting close. It was originally still daytime. The moment Elun's descended, the sky above the central hall of the Moon God Temple turned from day to night. As the bright moonlight filled the entire hall, Duque could feel the will of the goddess turning into a large ball of gentle light that enveloped him. Hello. Expert from another world, may I ask what name I should use to address you? Infernal Affairs? Or Mr. Dukong? Elun's voice was gentle, and it was easy to associate her with the role of a mother. Duque bowed and replied respectfully, a name is just a code. We have our own difficulties that we cannot tell you our real names, please forgive us. So if possible, Please call me by my fake name, Dukong. Alright, Dukong. First of all, thank you and your friends for choosing the side of Azeroth in this war. We thank you on behalf of the billions of lives in Azeroth. An illusory white humanoid woman covered in white light appeared, looking like a marshmallow. But there was no doubt that it contained Elun's will. Elun bowed to Duque. Not only her, but the 4 Dragon Kings, including Alexstrasza, also bowed to Duque. Chapter 1073. This Ronin was a little incoherent, Krasus was extremely excited, and even Lord Howl was a little embarrassed. Vanessa quietly took a step to the left and hid behind Duque, deliberately letting all the glory fall on Duque. Only Duque, the one and only Duque in the world, calmly accepted all of this under Tyron's surprised gaze. Duque did not think that there was anything wrong with this. After all, in the game, he was the man who had killed the true god Si, Thun, and held the chicken drumstick Atish. This was a habit that transmigrators naturally developed, and when faced with a grand occasion, it seemed more imposing and imposing. This was a gift from a true god and 4 demigods. Tyrant covered her mouth in shock. Duque did not know that because of his unintentional action, Elun and the 4 Dragon Kings had a higher opinion of Duque. After all, if Duque was the kind of person who relied purely on scheming to ruin the Burning Legion, he would not be worthy of their heartfelt respect. But if he was a true hero who dared to bet his life and soul, fight for the world, and suffer all kinds of humiliation to finally drive away the enemy, it was a completely different matter. An existence with this kind of spirit was worthy of being worshipped by everyone no matter where they went. Phew. Elun admired Duque very much. After letting out a light breath, she said in a very calm tone, "The other beings in the world of Azeroth, and I would like to know what happened in the Twisted Nether. My child Tyron will not hide anything from me. But we would like to know the process from your point of view." Duque tilted his head slightly. "Let me be clear. I am referring to you letting go of part of your spiritual world, and not just repeating it verbally. We have no intention of prying into your privacy, and we also know that this is very rude. In exchange, you can also state your request in advance, and we will do our best to satisfy you." Alexstrasza also chimed in. "Please do not treat this as a transaction. As a token of appreciation for your help in Azeroth, we have prepared a big gift for you. Let me stress that this is a friendly exchange. It's just that if you're willing to show us your memories, we'll give you more generous gifts. If you agree, we can give you as much as we can." As soon as she finished speaking, the 4 Dragon Kings took out the gifts they had secretly prepared and placed them on their palms. Every item was priceless. There were equipment and tools. For example, the Red Dragon Queen pulled out a translucent, illusory list for Duque to choose from. "I agree," Duque replied. "But before that, I would like to change my request to everyone." The moonlight avatar of Elun made a "please" gesture. "Lady Alexstrasza, I want your life blessing. Bestow upon the 5 of us that we can control with our own will and possess powerful regenerative abilities." "Sure." "Master Maligos, I want copies of all the magic manuscripts of the 5 elements: fire, frost, arcane, light, and darkness. Sir Isra, I want to construct the principles and tactics of the dream world." "No problem. Sir Nosdormu, I want—" At this point, Duque suddenly switched to the Draconic language, which was even more ancient. This shocked everyone present. Nosdormu nodded. "Lastly, Goddess Elun. My request will be made after I show you my memories." With that, Duque opened up his mind and showed Elun and the 4 Dragon Kings what he had seen and heard in Azeroth 10,000 years ago. However, Duque cleverly divided his mind into layers. He only showed them what they wanted to know on the outermost layer. Everything that involved his privacy was blurry and dark. There wasn't even any sound. Tyrant, who was standing behind Duke, had also entered the dreamscape that Isra had created for her. She watched the video, and her heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally calmed down. If even the bits and pieces of that ridiculous period were shown without reservation, it would be a shameful play and the cruelest public execution. If this was shown, Tyron would probably have no choice but to commit suicide. Duque's display also made the few big shots in Azeroth smile bitterly. They began to understand why Duque could actually hide from those demons who were good at playing with people's hearts and prying into their souls. Of course, they understood what they wanted to know, but they didn't miss out on anything else. In order to trick the Burning Legion, Elun did not hesitate to lose a high priest. Now it seemed that Elun had profited greatly from this matter. Of course, the temporary death of her husband, Malorn, was another matter. In the dream world outside of Duque's perception, Elun, the 4 Dragon Kings, and the demigod Cenarius, who had not made it back in time, were having a small meeting. Can it be trusted? Malygos asked impatiently. Among so many big shots, he was the one who suffered the most. Not only did he hate Nesario, but he also hated the Burning Legion. At this point in time, he was already so paranoid that he was going crazy. When he had the time to go find his recently dead wife, Syndagosa, and touch her resentment, he should have fallen into madness just like in history. 5 billion demons, 450 void lords. Such an exaggerated battle record, I almost thought it was fake. Nozdormu smiled bitterly. Duque's system elf's detection was the best in terms of the living, but in terms of detecting spirits, it was inferior to these gods and demigods. He also didn't know that he had done such an exaggerated job. Did you guys sense Sardra's unwilling will wandering outside the planet's space barrier? Alexstrasza laughed. It's true. Elun made the final decision, and the other demigods no longer had any objections. After leaving the Dream World conference room, Elun immediately announced the results. Not to mention Ronan and the others, even Duque was dumbfounded when he heard this number. That much? Isra, who had his eyes closed, broadcast the voice of the soul that was wandering in outer space. It was President Sardra's roar. Infernal affairs. You bastard. I won't let you go. Don't let me catch you. The boring threat behind was cut off by Isra. Isra smiled. How is it? Mr. Dukong, do you need protection? Azeroth welcomes you. Elun let out a long sigh of relief. Such a huge loss. The Burning Legion will not dare to come for at least 10,000 years. Well done. Mr. Dukong. Please tell me how you want me to reward you. Chapter 1074. Duque looked up at Elun. First, please help me cleanse the toxins in my body, as well as the contaminants in my soul. Dark energy, darkness, 7 sins. None of them were easy to deal with. These powers were like drugs. Once touched, there would be no good ending, especially the impurities in the soul. If there was no way to get rid of them, they would unknowingly fall into destruction and depravity. Duke didn't want to go overboard and become the villain. After all, he had personally blocked the path of the Burning Legion. Being a villain in Azeroth didn't have a good ending. Elun's blurry face showed a look of relief. The next second, a miracle descended from the sky. Countless night elves saw the bright moonlight that descended during the day, and knelt down to worship, chanting the name of the goddess of Elun. The gentle moonlight seeped into Duque's skin and entered his body through his pores. It then gathered in his meridians, forming a seemingly gentle but actually turbulent current. It began to cleanse the impurities and evil substances in Duque's body. Blarg! Duque suddenly made a retching motion. Tyron was quick to react. She quickly pulled the silver basin from the statue in the hall and placed it in front of Duque. Duque could no longer control himself and vomited. Blarg! Blarg! It was as if he was vomiting sesame paste. Not just from his mouth, but from his nose and eye sockets as well. Black substances were also gushing out. That feeling of suffocation was 100 times worse than vomiting after drinking too much. Duque knelt down on the spot. Tyron held the basin in one hand and patted Duque's back with the other to make Duque more comfortable. It was a terrible feeling. Not only was his body hollowed out, but the evil impurities hidden in his bones and soul were all forcibly extracted. It was very painful. But after extracting the dark matter, he felt as if his bones had become lighter, and he felt as if he was floating in the air. Elun smiled. Go and rest for the night. Tomorrow, I'll help you convert the dark power in your body into the power of the shadow. Darkness and shadow might seem similar, but in reality, they were completely different in nature. Darkness symbolized evil and destruction. Shadow was merely a byproduct of light. Where there is light, there is shadow. Where there is day, there is night. Even the power of Elun, the moon goddess, essentially belonged to shades. This was because moonlight was merely the refraction of sunlight in the dark night. When Duque finally finished vomiting, he panted heavily and thanked him. Thank you so much. Tyrant helped Duque down to rest. When Duque came back to his senses, he found himself in Tyrant's room. Looking around, it was simple and tidy. Apart from Elun's totem, it was filled with a scholarly aura. Tyrant fetched a tray of water and removed Duque's clothes. She then used the water and a cleansing spell to clean the dirt on Duque's face and body. For the sake of convenience, she even took off her priestess's robe. Duque suddenly said, "Will there be any gossip in your room? After all, you are the high priestess." Tyrant's face, which always carried a holy aura, was filled with a faint smile. "You say it as if you have not done anything to me." Ugh! The room suddenly fell into a silence that made Duque's balls ache. He suddenly smiled bitterly. Although before returning to the War of the Ancients 10,000 years ago, Duque had already noticed that Tyrant was acting strangely. She did not choose Malfurion as she did in the original history. Instead, she maintained a strange relationship with the Stormwind brothers, more than friends but not lovers. But Duque did not expect himself to be so thorough. He did not even give the Stormwind brothers a single chance. He did not know how Tyrant's enmity towards him 10,000 years later came about. He also did not know if what he was doing now was what he had, once, done to Tyrant in the original timeline 10,000 years later. In any case, it was now a bad debt. So, when he was a spy, he would be exposed at any moment. He did not have the time to think about how to deal with their relationship in the future. Now that he had dealt with the Burning Legion, his nervousness and fear had subsided. How to deal with his relationship with Tyrant had become a huge problem. According to his agreement with Nozdormu, as long as the Burning Legion was defeated like in history, he would activate the teleportation portal within 3 days and send the transmigrators who were still alive back to 10,000 years in the future. Don't even think about bringing any living beings back. Nozdormu had repeatedly emphasized before he left. Duque bared his teeth. What should he do now? Just as Duque's thoughts were running wild, he suddenly felt a wave of sourness. Duque was shocked to find that Tyrant had already started to attack Duque. "No, you can't." "Why?" Tyrant raised her head and stared at Duque, her pure face blushing. "Bastard! I didn't want to learn all this, but you forced me to. I'm just returning what you taught me to you." "Teacher," her voice was long, like the pout of a young girl. It sounded soft and numb. Duque didn't have much moral integrity now, and after hearing these words, his brain directly crashed. Duque grinned maliciously, and directly began to turn from defense to offense, climbing Shanghajar Peak. If I don't teach you a lesson, you might really forget the days when you were controlled by my sword. Come on, let's fight." It was obvious that Tyrant had sensed that Duque was about to leave. She fought back fiercely and tried to find a way to counterattack. Unfortunately, she was still too inexperienced. She was defeated by Duque's sword within 300 moves. The sky brightened. When Duque got up, Tyrant's back was facing him, but her shoulders were trembling. "Are you not going to say anything to me? Can't you just give me a title before leaving?" Duque did not know how to answer. After thinking for a while, he threw Nozdormu's warning into the twisting nether. "If I continue to stay here, my body and soul might collapse." The next moment, Tyrant was already in Duque's arms. She rubbed her tear-stained face against Duque's chest. "Will you come back?" Duque could not bear to see her like this. "If you are willing to wait for 10,000 years." After Duque said this, he felt that it was a shameful joke. Time and distance were the scariest poisons in the world of love. Before he had transmigrated, he had seen countless couples break up in less than a month. Furthermore, his relationship with Tyrande was not based on pure love. He did not know what Tyrande would think of him 10,000 years later. Was she enlightened? Had her love turned into hate? Was she filled with resentment? Or was it something else? He could not guess. Chapter 1075. Compared to the thousands of years of relationship he had with the Stormrage brothers, Duque's 1 month with Tyrande was like an instant. Expecting Tyrande to wait for him for 10,000 years? What was this? Back then, Lucia had waited for him for 10 years, and he felt that it was a miracle. If miracles could happen so casually, it would not be a miracle. 10,000 years was the lifetime of most night elves, even for the long-lived night elves. Duque could not possibly tell them that they would obtain a new well of eternity, and that the world tree Nordrassil would ensure their eternal youth until the Battle of Mount Hyjal, right? 10,000 years sounded more like an eternal farewell. But Duque could not explain it. No, actually, Duque wanted to explain, but when he opened his mouth, he found that his throat was stuck by an invisible force. The system concluded that it was the power of time. Had Nosdormu regained control of time and space after 15 years in the Dark Portal? Bastard! Why did he come at this time? Why did he come at this time? Duque was furious. Clear tears gushed out from her eyes, converging into a small stream that slid down her elegant and pure face. What a long time! 3,600,000 lonely nights. Was it self-mockery? A bitter smile? Or despair? Looking at Tyrande's face, Duque felt heartache for the first time. If he lost the 3 Windrunner sisters, Lucia or Jaina, he would probably feel the same way. Suddenly, he smiled bitterly. Duque decided to cheat. He first shook something which Tyrande recognized. It was what Duque had asked for from Nosdormu. Then, she turned into her shadow form, and as if she was caressing it, she gestured on the white bedsheet. The black light did not disappear in an instant. Instead, it left behind an illusion of a black door that lasted for a full 3 seconds. Finally, Duque shrugged as if to say, "I don't care if you believe it or not, I believe it." Tyrande was stunned at first, but then she seemed to understand. Duque did not know if she really understood or if she only half understood. What greeted him was a rain of kisses and a passion that was even hotter than fire. After the passion subsided, there was sorrow that could not be dissolved. Tyrande muttered unconsciously, "You despicable bastard, you turned me into this. 10,000 years is such a long time, how am I supposed to live alone? What if one day I suddenly really want to, what should I do?" He happened to see a few bananas on a fruit platter not far away from him. Duque's bad taste suddenly flared up again. Ah! Why is it again? All right, please don't mind these details. Duque unsheathed the Duque divine sword and showed Tyrande a spell. All right, please learn this spell. The spell was very simple. It was a variant of evocation magic. Tyrande was now a combination of a priestess and a hunter. This level of magic was nothing to her. The key was the effect of the spell. That bastard Duque had instantly shaped the bananas into the shape of the Duque divine sword. He used it as soon as he said it. Tyrande almost broke down on the spot. She could not continue after saying the word 3 times. "Very well, my student, please do your best to learn the most important spell that I will teach you," Duque earnestly instructed. "Wu, first, you have to restore its appearance. Then its strength and toughness. Finally, you have to restore its domineering characteristics. Think about it. Those terrifying days when you were dominated by the divine sword." Teacher Duque sang loudly. Tyrande's face was so red that it seemed as if blood would drip from it. But, she still learned it seriously under Teacher Duque's coercion. After settling everything, Duque stood on the balcony. His naughty face faced the sky at a 45-degree angle, and a tear rolled down his cheek. Teacher Duque praised himself in his heart. "Don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame me. As a restorer of history, I have to accurately restore history on the shoulders of the Lord of Time, Nosdormu. Alright, My last historical restoration mission in this era, air-dried banana, has been completed. Behind him, Tyrant seemed to have sensed something and roared, "Du Kong, you bastard!" In the morning, he once again went to the moon goddess's temple. This time, Ilun met Duque alone. Tyrant was the only one by his side. The moonlight once again appeared in the day, gently nourishing every single magic circuit in Duque's body. Yesterday, after his body had been cleansed of the impurities, it was not that obvious. Today, with the power of the moon goddess, Duque was pleasantly surprised to confirm that the curse that bastard Archimonde had given him had finally been removed. As expected, the curse of a demigod demon was best dealt with by a true god. Duque gently raised his hand, and a dozen elemental light orbs flew out of his palm. The 3 arcane energy orbs of fire, ice, and arcane magic disintegrated, reassembled, and disintegrated again in midair. Duque's mastery of elemental energy left Tyrant dumbfounded. "So you're a mage?" "Ah, sorry. I was injured and cursed, and my magic circuits were thrown into chaos. My abilities as a mage were completely sealed. Thank you, Goddess Ilun, for your help. Without you, I would have been a priestess for the rest of my life." "Isn't being a priestess good?" Tyrant was a little petulant. Not really. Do I have to tell you that every healer in my world has the heart to deal damage?" Ilun looked at Tyrant, who was like her own child, teasing Duque, and suddenly felt very comforted. If she forced Tyrant to sacrifice herself and ended up with a bad ending, she would never forgive herself. At that time, she had lost all hope and used her precious divine power to protect Tyrant. Fortunately, this man called Du Kong had appeared out of nowhere. She knew a lot about Tyrant and the Stormrage brothers. But there was no other way. This was the best outcome. It was just that Tyrant would probably have to suffer. Duque and Tyrant also realized that they had gone too far. After fooling around for a while, they regained their composure. Ilun continued, 4 of the items you obtained from Sargeras cannot be converted. They will bring you the deepest depravity. Then please destroy them for me, goddess." But Duque's heart was itching. It wasn't easy to get equipment from Sargeras, but most of them couldn't be used. "All right, I remember that there were 5 boxes in total." Ilun's blurry avatar smiled. "Thank goodness. And this one is the most compatible with my attributes. I can handle it for you." Duque looked at it, and his heart almost flew out of his chest. Moonlight Chalice. Chapter 1076. The Moonlight Holy Grail wasn't very famous among the players, but that wasn't the point. The point is, all you need to know is that it came from Sargeras. In the future, it would be brought into Sargeras' tomb, and could only be obtained from the Moon Sisters. In essence, this was an accessory for healers. However, after being personally adjusted by the Moon Goddess, Ilun, its attributes had changed greatly. The basic attribute of the entire accessory was intelligence, but it was a ridiculously high intelligence bonus. How high was it? For a radiant moon wizard, it was about 1,000 stories tall. Even Duke, a Breaking Dawn archmage, was forcibly raised to the level of a rank 3 Breaking Dawn after enjoying the additional magic circuits. He wasn't even at the peak. Duque absolutely believed that this item, which should have only appeared after the 7th version of the game, would definitely last him until he reached the demigod stage. Apart from the intelligence bonus, the special effect of the Moonlight Holy Grail was also very amazing. When activated, it would grant haste in the day and critical strike at night. What an interesting piece of equipment. Duke, who had originally come to the ancient war with the intention of working to repay his debt of gratitude, was truly overjoyed. "Ha! Thank you, Goddess Ilun." "Thank you." Duque bowed 3 times in a row in a rare moment of obedience. Compared to Shaman's huge gift bag, Jaden's gift was only average and within expectations. Even so, Duque finally managed to gather a full set of equipment that should have been at the Sunwell Highlands level in the future. Paired with the Wings of Death and Shaman's Moonlight Holy Grail, he was armed to the teeth. Of course, Duque wouldn't neglect Tyrant, and gave her a set of priest equipment. Those who stepped into the realm of heroes were all very powerful. For example, Tyrande was a huntress and a priest at the same time. In theory, she could wear chainmail like a hunter, but considering that her most lethal skill was the divine arts, her attire was more inclined towards cloth armor. In the War of the Ancients, many demon lords had been killed. Unfortunately, Ronan and the others were all fattened up on Mount Hyjal and basically didn't care about them. In the end, only Krasus changed his equipment. The problem was that this guy was a dragon. Dragons were the race that hated equipment the most. Their own scales, claws, and dragon breath were their strongest equipment. 3 days after the end of the Primordial War, it was finally time to part. Whether it was Ronan, Krasus, Grom, Vanessa, or Duke himself, they all felt like they were in a trance. Not to be tolerated by the world. Does not exist in this world. The world was rejecting Duke and the others, rejecting them. The indescribable feeling of the heavens and earth pressing down on them made it hard for them to breathe. On the balcony of the Elun shrine, Elun's incarnation led Isra and a group of demigods, while Tyrande led Malfurion and a group of mortals. They stared at Duke and the other four. They had only known each other for a short period of time, but everyone knew that without these mysterious and powerful helpers from afar, this earth-shattering battle would have ended with the Burning Legion's complete victory. This was especially so for this mysterious Dukong. As the core of the group of 6, he did not hesitate to disgrace himself by joining the Burning Legion, reversing the portal, destroying the Void Fortress in the Twisting Nether, and completely annihilating billions of demons. In one fell swoop, he established at least 10,000 years of peace in Azeroth. Until now, no one asked where the group of 6 came from. Everyone had a common goal, the Burning Legion. It was enough to understand this. Misty rays of light began to appear on the bodies of the remaining 5 people. It was as if a mysterious existence was using an eraser that could erase everything in the world to gently erase their majestic figures. Starting from their hands and feet, signs of disintegration began to appear. Alexstrasza and Isra simultaneously looked at Nozdormu, who was silent, as if they had seen through everything. Tyrande stood at the front of the group, her hands clasped tightly between the 2 Mount Hyjal peaks. This was the only way she could feel her intense heartbeat through her fingers. For the past 2 days, she had made use of every minute and second to be with Duque. She completely ignored everything else around her, including the Stormwind brothers' gazes. Before the final moment arrived, she had said all that needed to be said, and done all that needed to be done. She did not want to say goodbye. Even though she knew that the outcome could not be changed, she still could not control her emotions. At this moment, Elun's incarnation gave Tyrande a light push. "Go, my child." Without hesitation, Tyrande pounced forward, but when she opened her arms and crossed them, all she could see was an illusion. The last thing she saw was a face that only she could see, a face with a bitter smile. This was Du Kang's true appearance. He was not as bad as she had imagined, nor was he very handsome, but he was very much like you. Tyrande knelt on the ground, her entire body filled with melancholy and reluctance. Unbeknownst to her, everyone had already left. No matter how conflicted the Stormwind brothers were, they could only look at Tyrande's back, which seemed to be trembling from crying, and left with a long sigh. Only she and Elun's incarnation were left on the balcony. "Child, have you thought it through? This is 10,000 years of loneliness. As long as you are willing to turn back." Tyrande suddenly stood up. Her blue hair danced in the wind, and she gently combed it with her fingers. Feeling the aura of fate flowing in the wind, her long and elegant silver eyes seemed to see through time and space. Seeing 10,000 years in the future, Tyrande suddenly smiled. "Perhaps my first encounter with him was definitely a prank by the goddess of fate. But don't you think that my 10,000 years of loneliness in exchange for 10,000 years of peace in Azeroth is too worth it?" "Child." Tyrande suddenly turned back, her beautiful face filled with determination. "At first I was helpless. But later, that was my choice. Since I chose a great hero who could fight against the Burning Legion. A mere 10,000 years is nothing. Was it anger? Self-mockery? Perseverance? Or stubbornness? Not to mention Elun, even Tyrant herself did not know if she could really persevere with this slightly twisted emotion for 10,000 years. On the other side, Duque returned, also with melancholy. Perhaps, after the War of the Ancients, history would develop like the original version. For example, Illidan would once again build the Well of Eternity, and then the world tree Nordrassil would be planted, followed by the Naga's reproduction and revenge, but Duque was thinking about something else. The figures of the five turned into streams of light, traveling at high speed in the long river of history. At this moment, a ray of bronze light suddenly crashed into Duque. This scene was so inconceivable. It was as if a sharpshooter had shot a flying arrow from the opposite side in a manner that allowed him to reach his target first. The bronze light knocked Duque out of the fixed space-time orbit. Chapter 1077. Duque. Master. Beast Duke. The remaining four members of the history revisionists all cried out in shock. However, their cries were of no use. They were still wrapped in Nosdormu's power as they sped toward the end of the river of time. What's going on? I don't know. Isn't Nosdormu's power protecting us? Damn it. The bronze dragon isn't reliable at all. There was a lot of discussion, but no one could do anything. This wasn't their domain. Other than pointlessly waving their arms, they couldn't even draw their weapons, let alone launch an effective attack. Nosdormu's mysterious power isolated them from the outside world. Apart from seeing, speaking, and listening, they couldn't do anything. The power that collided with Duque seemed to be bronze too, right? Krasis asked. Ronan frowned. Did Nosdormu suddenly give Master a new mission? Vanessa was furious. That's not how you order people around. Grom hammered his thigh. Bastard. Then Lord Roar fell silent. No one knew who he was cursing or what he was cursing at. At this moment, in the void of the time crevice far behind the four of them, Duke was staring at a huge bronze dragon in the air. Hello. Duke Marcus. I am Andam, a subordinate of His Majesty Nosdormu. The bronze dragon lowered his head slightly to show his respect. Duke didn't even lift his eyelids, as if he was in a half-awake state as he sized up this huge bronze dragon. I'm sorry to interrupt your return. There's an emergency. Time and space are in disorder again. His Majesty's command, you, Duke Marcus, are to head to the point of disorder immediately. Help the founding Emperor Sorodin and the High Elves defeat the Trolls during the Troll War 2,800 years ago in your original timeline. Help him build the Arather Empire. With that, a green light flashed in Andam's hand. A magic scroll appeared in his claws, and he handed it to Duque. It was clearly in order. Duque frowned. Let me have a look. Yes, the situation is urgent, so there's no time to explain. Please take a look at the order book for the specifics. I'll open the time passage to the Troll War right away. Then, after seeing Duque take the scroll, Andam began to cast a spell. His dragon claws, which only had 3 fingers, cooperated with the spell and made all kinds of complicated gestures. Soon, a hazy and illusory portal was about to form. At this moment, without any sign or reason, a thin golden sword pierced through the gap between the scales on Andam's back. It extended to the length of a spear and came out of Andam's chest. Andam let out a shrill roar and swung his tail at the ambusher who had injured him. The dragon's tail, which was strong enough to shatter mountains, missed. He covered his chest with his left claw and twisted his neck. Only then did he see the ambusher, Duque. With Ice Queen in his left hand and Hendulf, the legendary sword of the white-robed sword saint, in his right, Duque had a mocking smile on his face and stared at Andam maliciously. Duke Marcus, how dare you hurt me? Do you know what you're doing? You're challenging His Majesty Nosdormu. Are you declaring war on the entire bronze dragon race? Andam roared. Duque was unmoved. Instead, he sneered. Pretend. Keep pretending. You're just a stupid eternal dragon, and you want to fool me? Andam's face suddenly darkened. No, his whole body began to turn black. The wounds on his body were healing at a high speed, and his body began to expand rapidly. In less than a second, his entire body doubled in size. As a mortal, Duke Marcus, you're amazing. You actually found out? May I ask, how did you find out? In terms of appearance, Andam was still a bronze dragon, but his color had completely turned into a deep and terrifying ink black. Duque tilted his head. From the moment I was thrown into the twisting nether for no reason, I realized that someone wanted to kill me. And this guy is a super strong person with the power to interfere with the timeline. At first, I thought it was an ancient god, but then I locked my target on the eternal dragon body. Mortals don't know about us. Even Nosdormu doesn't know much about us. But I do. Duque interrupted Andam with unspeakable pride on his face. Yes, this was also the pride of a transmigrator. As if choked to death, Andam laughed crazily. Stupid guy, do you think you can fight back? You have no chance. Idiot, look at what you have in your hand. Duque waved the magic scroll in his hand. You mean this thing? Sorry, the whispers inside are useless to me. This time, Andam's expression finally changed. Impossible. Duque's face was full of the smile of a victor. The whispers of the ancient gods are indeed powerful. But that's only for you silly dragons and other mortals. As for me, really he. Although Andam couldn't grasp the essence of the word, he, Duque's expression almost drove him crazy. That's right. That's the expression. Whether it's you eternal dragons or Sargeras, I like to see you sad and indignant and want to kill me, but can't do anything about it. Duque was smug. He also had the capital to be smug. There was nothing more satisfying than throwing the opponent into a trap that he had set himself after he had broken the game. The whispers of the ancient gods? It was indeed powerful. Unfortunately, the whispers had a prerequisite, and that was to directly affect the deep subconscious of the victim. But ever since Duque had infiltrated the Burning Legion, he had been dividing his spiritual sea into layers and using the system to simulate a seemingly independent spiritual world in the shallowest layer. And from beginning to end, Duque couldn't speak the language of this world. Almost everything needed to be translated by the system. After Duque's special instructions, the whispers of the ancient gods became like this. Have you finished your homework? Your mom is actually an orc. Your dad something Marcus, found a Tauren as a mistress. Your brother Sal heard that I came back safely and decided to go to the temple to do a striptease. Heavens! I am really good. Damn. Scared. Ugh. Chapter 1078. By the way, what the hell was an eternal dragon? Why would the eternal dragons have the whispers of the ancient gods? This was a very long history. At first, when the Titan left Azeroth, he gave the 5 dragon aspects their own unique abilities, and at the same time, made them shoulder their respective responsibilities. For the bronze dragon, this responsibility was much more complicated than for the other dragons. They had to guard time and stick to the path of destiny. In the process of being the guardian of time, Nosdormu faced many dilemmas, and he eventually became the leader of the Eternal Dragons, forming a dragon legion that disturbed the timeline in various ways. So, what did this distant story have to do with Delano? For words, closely related. Delano's fate had long been tied to Azeroth. Although it was another planet, from the first day of the birth of this universe, these two worlds were inseparable, and they would depend on each other in the future. More importantly, Azeroth was not the first planet that the Titan had modified. The Titan traveled through countless worlds, each world being made into a unique piece of beautiful jade in its original form. However, all worlds had a common connection. When the leader of the Pantheon, Sargeras' elder brother, the spouse of Ionar the Life-Giver, Amuncel, the Creation Titan, gave Nosdormu the power of time, he also gave the Bronze Dragon a maxim. The great mission given to you is to maintain the purity of time. Know that there is only one true timeline, and you must protect it. If time does not flow in the established way, the consequences will be beyond your imagination. the structure of reality will fall apart. This is a heavy task, the foundation of all tasks in this world, because without time, there is no life. There was only one true timeline, not only for Azeroth, but also for the entire grand universe. So did parallel times exist? Of course. Moreover, the parallel time was constantly threatening to jump to the real timeline. If there was enough time power, a character could jump from a broken timeline to another time, and various effects would occur. For example, Sar was likely to be sold as a slave and then died in the arena. Another example was for Neltharion to pretend to be Lord Presto and successfully kill Tyreenus to become the leader of the Alliance. All of these characters exist, and all of them are living beings, some malevolent and terrifying, others noble and righteous, depending on the direction of their timeline. But the timeline they were in was not the real timeline, and their lives were not set. The Bronze Dragon, on the other hand, shuttled through the various timelines and cleaned up the time fragments created by the Eternal Dragon, so that these events would not affect the real world that Duque was currently in. This was the responsibility of Nozdormu and the Bronze Dragon. At first, when Nozdormu obtained the power to transcend time, he also knew how he would understand his life. Was this an unnecessary move? Of course not. This was to tell Nozdormu that even after obtaining the power of time, he would still reach the end, death. When there is life, there is death. When there is a beginning, there is an end. Everything is like this. As such, Nozdorm understood the need to protect the true timeline, as he could see what was happening in other timelines. However, in a certain timeline, Nozdormu was influenced by the whispers of the ancient gods, became Nozdr, and established the Eternal Dragon army. The purpose of the Eternal Dragons was to change the fate of the world and destroy the real timeline, the timeline that Duque was in. Although Duke himself wasn't sure if the timeline he had transmigrated to was the real main timeline, but since ancient times, humans were mostly self-centered creatures. Didn't you see how Copernicus was burned at the stake for violating the geocentric theory? Since Duque had crossed into this timeline, maintaining this timeline as the main result had become one of Duque's duties. Although I, Duque, am also a guy who does not stop causing trouble is my privilege, okay? You eternal dragons who have been brainwashed by the ancient gods dare to say that you want to destroy the world that I have fought for and destroy my harem? Who am I going to attack if not you? The eternal dragon who claimed to be Andam was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Perhaps he was Andam, but he could only be the brainwashed version of Andam in that collapsed timeline. He wanted to kill Duque. How could Duque not want to kill him? In the time gap above the river of time, an eternal dragon and a traveler started a life and death duel. In Duque's sight, Andam forcibly healed the wound on his chest that had just been pierced by Duque. Ha! Stupid mortal! Nozdormu's lackey, you don't understand the greatness of time and the power of time at all. All your damage is ineffective against me. Ha! Andam laughed wildly. Then he was slapped in the face by Duque. I don't know why a certain eternal dragon used up 30% of the power in his body to turn time back to a time when he was not injured. Andam's laughter stopped abruptly, and there was clear fear on his extremely anthropomorphic face. Andam the eternal dragon, you can deceive idiots without common sense, but you can't deceive my eyes. Duque pointed at his eyes, but he was actually pointing at the system parameter display on his retina. There, Andam's HP bar was full again, but his blue bar had dropped by a full 30%. More importantly, the system determined that Andam's hostile level was not the undefeatable skeleton level, but the rare elite silver dragon level. The fattest thing in this world was, of course, the boss, but in the normal solo state, rare elites were also a good way to make a fortune. You know nothing about the battle in the realm of time. Andam roared, and it seemed to spit out a black flame behind him for no reason. Unexpectedly, Duque neither advanced nor retreated, and directly took 3 steps to the left. Something strange happened. The next moment, the black flame actually passed through Duque's left side. It looked like Duque had almost hit the dragon's breath, but he was actually unharmed. Impossible? How can a mortal see through it? Andam was so surprised that he almost bit his tongue off. Isn't it just the calculation of time and space? Duque looked at Andam as if he was a mentally handicapped child, which almost made Andam go crazy. The calculation of time and space was easy to say, and even many combat theories since ancient times were actually based on this theory. But in the long river of time, who could calculate as accurately as Duque, who had the system elf? Chapter 1079. In a primitive duel, the easiest way for one party to see the other with a weapon was to stab the weapon directly at the shortest distance. It took time to stab, and during this time, if the other party blocked, dodged, or otherwise nullified the attacker's attack, it would be a successful defense. This was the difficulty of fighting in the river of time. On the surface, there was no problem with a human and a dragon communicating verbally, but this was just an illusion caused by the time rift. They were actually separated from each other for a long time. This was not a matter of minutes or seconds. Often, if one dodged well, it could be a day, a month, or even a long time in units of time. Let's say, if the guy you're facing took a year to stab you, it would be a genius for him to be able to stab you in the same spot as you were. Under normal circumstances, if you were to be stabbed, you'd be a genius. This was the problem in the time rift. Both Duque and Andam were protected by the laws of time. Although Duque had the power of Nosdorm, the laws of time between them had to be judged according to the laws in the river of time. To hurt each other, one had to calculate the true time and distance between each other. It stood to reason that a mortal like Duque could not have this ability, which was why Andam refused to believe it. However, in the next moment, Duque slapped the eternal dragon in the face with practical action. Slap. A huge palm of arcane energy slapped Andam's dragon face. This was not just a simple slap in the face. With the power of time in the river of time, the slap actually collapsed half of Andam's face. On Andam's long dragon mouth, the upper and lower lip muscles that covered the right dragon tooth were all slapped away. Strangely and terrifyingly, there was no blood splattering everywhere, and all the wounds turned into scabs in an instant. It could be clearly seen that many of the dragon teeth in Andam's right jaw had cracks, and then they gave off an ancient feeling. Finally, the teeth fell out. The eternal dragon's strong teeth were not destroyed by the impact, but old. Duque's magic attack actually attracted the power of time, directly accelerating the decline and aging of the injured part. This time, Andam was afraid. He was truly afraid. He flapped his wings with all his might, striving to widen the time distance between him and Duque. At the same time, he shouted, Your true form is a bronze dragon? Bronze dragon? Duque sneered. At the same time, his feet did not stop. I'm not such a high-end existence. I'm Duque, a mortal, although ordinary but a little special. While smiling, Duque walked towards Andam at a seemingly slow pace. Only the eternal dragon, who also used time as a weapon, knew the horror of Duque. Every step he took seemed to be strolling leisurely, but he actually avoided every unstable node in the dimensional rift, and then stepped on a small tributary that could accelerate the flow of time. The principle behind this method of playing was no different from surfing, but the danger involved and the grasp of time were simply exquisite. Such a method was far superior to that of an eternal dragon born as a bronze dragon. No, it can't be, Andam shouted. Am I going to be killed by you like a target? Is that what you think makes sense? Duque snorted. While the two enemies spat at each other, their hands were unwavering. Andam blasted dozens of dragon breaths, as well as over 100 kinds of offensive spells that Duque knew or couldn't figure out at all, at Duque's head. In Andam's imagination, with Duque's weak vitality, just one hit would make him kneel. Fragile? Perhaps it was. Compared to the big, powerful lizards like the dragons, the human body was too fragile. In other words, because of the dragon's strong vitality, they could have many opportunities to make mistakes. Humans, however, could not. Many people would be frightened and cowardly in such a situation where they would die in one hit, and they would greatly lose their level. In the past, Duque was likely to be like this, but 15 years of experience had long turned Duque from a rookie who could not fight at all into a beast feared on the battlefield. Andam's attacks seemed to be a storm, but Duke still looked like he was oblivious to everything and was playing with elegant micro-steps. Under his feet, there was a colorful light that condensed all the past historical fragments of the world. If he was not careful, he could fall into a certain period of history and never come out again. Either he would be integrated into that period of history, or he would be swallowed by that period of time and space. Not even his bones would be left. In front of him was the violent and brutal destructive power that gathered all the killing intent of the eternal dragon. If he was hit by one, it would be enough to turn Duque into ashes and disappear from history forever. Even Nozdormu could not find a trace of this terrible attack. But Duque had a 100% dodge. No, no, no. Impossible. Andam screamed, but he could not stop Duque, who was holding a golden sword, from approaching him. Duque also fought back, and countless hands of magic appeared above the river of time, shooting into the void without any rhyme or reason. It seemed like a waste of magic power to shoot randomly, but when Andam tried to dodge Duque's frontal attack, he was shocked to find that those shots actually blocked his escape route. This should be impossible in the domain of the river of time, where the flow of time was not fixed and could even be said to be quite chaotic. This was like someone firing a shot 100 years ago, and the bullet flew unscientifically for 100 years before accurately hitting the enemy. It was simply absurd. Andam wanted to ignore this fact, but the constant pain coming from all over his body told him that all of Duque's attacks were real and not an illusion. He could indeed use special magic to heal his injuries, but unfortunately, both sides knew that this recovery ability was not endless. This form of recovery by reversing time consumed more magic power than the holy light recovery developed by humans and night elves. No, no, no. Andam screamed incessantly, constantly changing his attack methods in an attempt to hit Duque. Unfortunately, no matter what, it was as ridiculous as a mortal trying to chop a ghost to death with a kitchen knife. Unknowingly, Duque had arrived in front of Andam and stood still, his face full of sarcasm that made Andam look like he deserved a beating. "It's over. Eat my meteor chi explosion." In the river of time, the golden sword light formed one gorgeous arc of light after another, incessantly cutting the eternal dragon's huge body. From the initial 100% recovery, to black blood splattering everywhere, and then to screams. 3 seconds later, when the 1024 sword slashes were finished, the river of time returned to deathly silence. Chapter 1080. Villains died because they talked too much, and righteous people died because they talked too much. Speaking of which, everything that Duque said before could be included in the scope of mental attacks. It wasn't until the system prompt said that the eternal dragon Andam from another timeline died that Duque breathed a sigh of relief. Damn, the Moonlight Holy Grail is too awesome. Duque suddenly discovered that because Gandalf, the legendary sword of the white-robed sword saint, was a rare and strange magic sword, it enjoyed the complete magic bonus, and the Moonlight Holy Grail was effective. And in this place where it was impossible to distinguish between day and night, the amazing Moonlight Holy Grail could trigger 2 special effects at the same time: spell haste and critical hit. What was even more incredible was that in this space where time could be compressed and extended infinitely, attack speed and critical hit damage could be stacked almost infinitely. This was the birth of the completely unreasonable 1024 sword strikes in 3 seconds. The Eternal Dragon was actually chopped by Duque's melee attack. Duque quickly searched Andam's body and quickly calmed down. He sensed Nozdorm's power and let himself fly back to the space-time route that Nozdorm had set for him on the River of Time. In the end, Duque didn't have the ability to travel through time on his own. He could survive on the River of Time entirely because of Nozdorm's power. Here came the problem. As insurance, Nozdorm must have injected a lot of power into Duque in the process of sending him back to the modern world, but no matter how much it wouldn't be double. According to the system's estimation, it was about 130%. However, in the space-time rift just now, even though Duke had played a beautiful wave-like subtle steps above the river of time and dodged 100%, he still consumed a lot of time power because he entered the space-time rift. Only 98% of the original energy is left? Duke narrowed his eyes. According to the calculation, assuming that he successfully returned to the original time point of the dark portal in 16 years, the energy needed was 100, and now Duke needed 98. Don't underestimate the 2% difference. The slightest difference could lead to a great difference. If Duke were to kneel, he would definitely kneel at these 2 percentage points. Looks like I can only count on this. Duke looked at the ball of unknown energy wrapped in arcane energy in his hand. System Elf, begin analysis. That was what he had obtained from killing Andam. It wasn't a gold coin or a piece of legendary equipment, but a mass of power. Duque felt a slight pain in his brain. It was the side effect of the System Elf extracting Duque's memories at high speed. As an engineering university student, his knowledge of physics and astronomy was passable. When the System Elf combined a large amount of modern knowledge with the power of time snatched from the Eternal Dragon, and put it together with the arcane Archmage's deceleration tactic for analysis, a mysterious magic tactic barged into Duque's mind. Time acceleration. Speed up? I can only use this bit of power once. Duque smiled bitterly. According to the original remaining power of time, Duque would obviously fall into the time period 16 years before the Dark Portal. Either he would go to a time point before his main body had transmigrated, or even worse, he would go to the world of Azeroth between the 1st and 16th years of the Dark Portal, where there was already a Duque. If the use of acceleration was too exaggerated and he went to a later time point, my, Duque's, kingdom would be finished. Damn it. I hate the Eternal Dragon the most. The second is Nosdormal. He can't even protect me through time, and he has the nerve to ask me to work for him? But, in the future, whoever wants to go can go, but don't ask me and my people to go. Although he was cursing, Duque had to restrain his mind and concentrate on the river of time. Through the time fragments that the system kept scanning, he confirmed where his end point was. When Duque saw the fragment of Thoradin the Great, Duque realized that it was a little close. Then, Duque saw the fragment of Aegwin dominating the world. Then, Aegwin beat up Sargeras, who was pretending to be a grandson. When Duque's retina showed that there was only 2% of the power of time left, Duque's spirit was lifted. Now is the time. Duque began to accelerate. Suddenly, he injected that small ball of power of Andam into the space-time shield around him, and Duque's whole body burst out with a stronger stream of light. Like a comet falling into the atmosphere, Duque's whole body glowed, dragging a long tail of flames, and swept across the sky above the river of time. He saw the fragment of the opening of the Dark Portal, saw himself killing the Mediv possessed by Sargeras, saw the Alliance commander Duque sweeping through the Horde, and saw him returning from the void to once again organize the Alliance to fight against the Scourge army. Finally, he saw his destination, 16 years of the Dark Portal. In front of him, it seemed that because Ronin and the others had just entered this part of the time node, Duque could still see the 4 small holes that had just been opened and not yet closed with the help of the system. Go in for me. Duque was too fast. Breaking into that point of time was like driving at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour, stretching his hand out of the car window and using 2 fingers to pinch a strand of hair that was blown by the wind by the window. Other than Duke, who had the System Elf, there was no one else who could do better than him in this kind of insanely precise operation. Even if Nosdorm's main body came over, he would at most be able to do this by pulling each other's strength, instead of crashing into it with insufficient strength like Duque. Duque did it. He had indeed met his goal. He succeeded, and failed, because he had indeed hit the time bubble that represented the time he was at, but in the next instant he was sent flying. On the 16 years of time bubble of the Dark Portal, a black power that clearly came from the Eternal Dragon was rejecting Duque's entry. King Hell. With the momentum, Duque's entire body continued to fly forward in the river of time. The only fortunate thing was that Duque's collision seemed to have finally attracted the attention of that bastard dragon, Nosdorm. Right on top of the huge time bubble, a huge bronze dragon claw reached out and attempted to grab Duque, who was flying forward at high speed. Nosdorm failed. He grabbed nothing. Although it was just a little bit off, it was still nothing. Nosdorm, you useless dragon king. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Duque was furious. Duque cried. Duque was in despair. However, at the very end, a sentence suddenly appeared from the system. Analysis of space-time anchor, tactic completed, found the nearest anchor point in front. Do you want to enter? Duque said decisively. Chapter 1081. The 16th year of the Dark Portal was destined to be a turbulent one. Before winter was over, the Alliance launched a large-scale attack on the Lordaeron continent and reclaimed Lordaeron, which had fallen and changed hands twice. On the 12th of August, the Alliance received a piece of bad news. Of the 6 powerhouses who participated in Nosdormu's secret operation, only 4 returned. The old beastman, Brock, died in battle. The tribe did not announce the exact cause of his death. They only announced that he died in the hands of the Burning Legion in a secret operation that could not be announced to the public. Thrall and Grom led the elders of the tribe to attend Brock's state funeral. The other was Duque, the former leader of the Alliance. Even though he was cursed by Kill Jaden, he forcefully reversed the curse and banished the power of darkness. He was a great hero who went missing in a secret mission. Although it was not the first time Duque went missing, his disappearance this time caused an even bigger uproar. Because the 4 survivors said that a bronze dragon stopped Duque, the reaction of several major countries in the Alliance was extremely intense. Queen Sylvanas of the Sin Dorii Kingdom, Queen Jana of Kotus, Queen Kalia of Lordaeron. The heroines of the Alliance, Aurelia and Sasha, as well as Elugia, who had great influence in the South Sea city-state, all sent the sternest questions to the bronze dragons. Nosdormu could ignore these mortal forces, but the problem was that his big sister, the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, had personally come to his doorstep and almost destroyed his nest. Also, the moon goddess Elun had descended a few times. Nosdormu was getting a headache. Time passed day by day. Aurelia and the other women waited day by day, but they were disappointed every day. We should be at ease. Duque might have gone to that person to fool around. Aurelia smiled bitterly. Vanessa had already reported to her on the first day she returned. However, that person had a strange reaction as well. He firmly denied Aurelia and the others' indirect inquiries. However, the Alliance and the Night Elves weren't really allies. The 5 women of the Duque family couldn't find a better reason to bother them. In any case, the Moon God Shrine just dealt with them indifferently. In fact, the leader of a country was very busy. In this day and age, there wasn't a king who was lucky enough to be a human stamping machine. Every family has its own troubles. Sin Dorii and Kul Tiras were busy rebuilding, and Elugia also needed to use the power of the South Sea city-state and the Marcus family's merchant fleet to help these 2 families. In the end, the only ones who were free were the Windrunner's eldest sister and 3rd sister. Tyrande would visit Aurelia or Sasha whenever she had the time. She didn't have the time to leave them hanging. The days of the Night Elves were really not good. On one hand, they had to provide disaster relief from the explosion of Mount Hyjal, and on the other hand, they had to face all kinds of threats. Sentries must be sent to the eastern Azhara to keep an eye on the new Naga and Satyrs. Although the South had once joined forces with the Horde to fight against the Burning Legion, the Horde's continuous requests for logging made the Night Elves very unhappy. In fact, in the Stonetalan Mountains, the 2 races also had border conflicts. On the western shore of the Black Sea, a large number of Night Elves who had lost their homes were waiting for ships to cross the sea. This was because in Teldrassil, Fandral Staghelm advocated to plant a 2nd world tree there. At the same time, he tried his best to negotiate with the Dragon Slumber Shrine, attempting to get the 3 Dragon Kings to continue to give blessings like the World Tree, Nordrassil. In other words, the night elves would lose their eternal life and youth. Many elves felt a sense of crisis. In the northern Winterspring Valley, they were invaded by the undead who claimed to be the Forsaken. In the central Fellwood Forest and Grey Valley, the remaining demons of the Burning Legion were still doing evil. Tyrant's claim that they were busy was definitely reasonable. After being repeatedly rejected, Aurelia and her sister rarely came to Teldrassil. Time passed like this, and in the blink of an eye, it was the beginning of the 17th year of the Dark Portal. The construction of the Horde's main city, Orgrimmar, was announced. At the same time, the Horde's territory had expanded a lot. In the north, they basically reached the edge of the Night Elves' territory, and in the south, Theramore was also bordering Theramore. In view of this, after some discussion, the Alliance decided to agree to the peace treaty proposed by Thrall during the King's Conference when the Night Elves were still unwilling to accept the Alliance's olive branch. In June of the same year, as the new Alliance leader, Varian Wrynn, personally crossed the Endless Sea and came to Theramore to meet with Thrall to sign the peace treaty between the Alliance and the Horde. In the end, Varian unexpectedly disappeared, and when he came back, he was completely muddle-headed. The Alliance suspected that it was a conspiracy by the Horde, and there were even conspiracy theorists who directly accused the Horde's wizards and warlocks of doing this. Thrall could not defend himself, and the relationship between the Alliance and the Horde suddenly froze. Time continued to pass. Who knew how many days, months, or years had passed? Suddenly, a huge ripple appeared in the thick clouds in the night sky. A comet fell from the sky, streaking across the sky with a long tail of flames, and crashed into the surface of a huge lake. Boom! A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The huge waves caused chaos on the beautiful shore of the lake. After a short but intense wave that was like a tsunami crashing into the shore, it was a mess everywhere. A human body that looked like a salted fish was washed to the shore. Am I the dead? In a daze, the human body only saw a pair of white boots with golden embroidery standing in his blurry vision, and then he lost consciousness. After an unknown amount of time, Duque woke up. The moment he regained consciousness, Duque felt that something was wrong, because he found himself tied to an execution rack, and his eyes were blindfolded. Not good, not good. This is definitely not good. Duque suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. If it was not a hostile force, he would never be tied up like this. Who knew how many seals were placed on his body to forcibly suppress the circulation of the magic circuit in his body? It would be better if the system elf was operating normally, but after passing through the time barrier, the system elf seemed to be temporarily down. Who was it? Which faction was it? Logically speaking, in Azeroth, it was probably the Forsaken who hated him so much, right? What the hell? Am I really that unlucky? Did I suddenly fall into the hands of those skeletons? Or did history change drastically again, and I came to a time when the situation is collapsing? Suddenly, a deliberately suppressed voice sounded in Duque's ear. It was a hoarse voice, and other than judging that it should be a female voice, Duque could not tell anything else. Duke Marcus, do you know what sin you have committed? Accompanied by a sharp rebuke was the sound of a long whip hitting the ground. Chapter 1082. Wax dripping? Yamit? It sounded so scary. Duque's face fell. If you're a demon from the Burning Legion, then my crime of slaughtering 5 billion of your people is unforgivable. But can I trouble you not to use an old torture tool that hasn't been used in centuries to pretend to be a demon from the evil faction in such a beautiful place? Really, you don't look like one at all. Suddenly, there was another whip. This time, it accurately brushed past the side of Duke's cheek, and the strong wind it brought caused Duke's face to feel a stinging pain. I didn't ask you about the Burning Legion. The woman was furious. Not official business? Tyrant, is that you? If there was anyone that Duque owed, it would definitely be Tyrant. After all, whether it was intentional or not, he had committed crimes in the ancient war and left her behind for 10,000 years. You still know? As if adding fuel to the fire, the woman's voice suddenly rose by an octave. In her rage, she finally revealed her original voice. Everyone had their own unique way of speaking. Tyrant's voice, which was filled with holiness and did not seem angry even when she was angry, was something that only the priestesses of the Moon Shrine possessed. Duque no longer hesitated and used his ultimate move. He did something that she definitely did not expect. He used his muscular strength and broke the two rusty and brittle shackles on his wrists in a very manly manner. The next moment, he followed the voice and hugged the beauty in front of him. "I'm sorry, Tyrant." Before Duque could finish speaking, he instinctively felt that the woman in his arms was not Tyrant. The height of her breasts was completely different. One had to know that before he transmigrated, Duque had visually measured Tyrant's size. Over the past 10,000 years, she had not weakened at all. Alright, here comes the terrible question. Who is she? At that moment, Duque clearly felt the malice of the goddess of destiny. As the black cloth in front of his eyes slid off, Duque could clearly see that he was hugging a green-haired priestess. Less than 5 meters in front of him, the main character of the scene, Tyrant, pushed open the door angrily and saw everything perfectly. Such a melodramatic scene. Who dares to tell me that no one deliberately arranged it? Duque, will be the first to not believe it. But, as expected, Tyrant flew into a rage. Duque, Tyrant raised her hands and used her ultimate skill, Starfall. Duque's face froze. What had happened to Tyrant in the past 10,000 years? Why did it accumulate so much resentment? Duque had no way of knowing the answers to these questions. All he knew was that things were getting out of hand. The thick clouds in the sky were suddenly parted by a huge meteor, bringing with it the shrill cry of death as it crashed down. It was a meteor the size of a carriage. Only Tyrant, as the high priestess of the moon goddess, could accurately use Elun's power to make the meteor fall from outer space towards Duque. The blue beam of light locked onto Duque's forehead was the best guide. Under the power of the moon goddess, the meteor sped up and sped up. From breaking through the clouds to landing on Duque's forehead, it took less than 3 seconds. Perhaps Duque could have chosen to dodge or use his Breaking Dawn magic to defend himself. If not, he could have used Ice Barrier to take the hit. Duque did not. Because when he saw the anger written all over that beautiful face that seemed to have been separated for only half a day, Duque's heart suddenly ached. What happened to Tyrant was also recorded in the original history. In the original timeline, she was also captured by Savis, but because of the Gemini's strategy, even Archimonde could not touch Tyrant under Elun's power. Even so, many night elves were unhappy with Tyrant because of this, believing that she had already submitted. In fact, being captured was a humiliation in itself. Because of this, rumors began to spread. They said that Tyrant had been tainted by demons and had lost her purity, so she did not have the right to be the high priestess of Elun. They also said that Tyrant had already betrayed her people like Queen Azhara, but there was no evidence. There were even rumors that Tyrant had instructed Malfurion to protect Illidan, who should have been sentenced to death. In the original timeline, Tyrant was already so sad. Now that Duque was a living witness, Duque could totally imagine what kind of scolding Tyrant had endured in the past 10,000 years, such as being despicable, immersed in lust, abandoning the Stormrage brothers. Duque silently sensed the falling meteorite from the sky. When the death that fell from the sky smashed the roof and was about to fall on his head, Duque still made a heavy decision. It seemed like he had not died for a long time. "Then I'll die this time, I owe you." Arcane impact. With only the force of impact pushed the woman in his arms away. Duque looked up 45 degrees to the sky, with a faint smile on his face, and opened his arms. Accompanying that resigned expression was the tear that flowed from his left eye. When the meteorite was less than a meter away from Duque's head, Duque silently mouthed 3 words, "Yes." Rise. Then, Duque calmly closed his eyes and waited for death to come. Whoosh! Very abruptly, the sound of destruction came to an abrupt end. The once incomparably noisy world seemed to have been erased by the attack of the gods. Death did not come as expected. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. When Duque could not help but open his eyes again, he saw an incomparably shocking scene. The meteorite that seemed to be able to pierce through a mountain had actually stopped less than 10 centimeters away from his head. A bright white light enveloped the entire meteorite, preventing it from descending any further. The next moment, a head of long blue hair with streaks of silver covered Duque's entire vision. Before he could even react, Duque's lips had already been taken over by an incomparably domineering force. Under the immense force in front of him, Duque's entire body fell backwards, and he felt dizzy. That familiar deep kiss, that familiar feeling of her chest. That's right, it's definitely Tyrant. Duque was a little confused, but this did not stop him from enjoying the beauty's love. How long did they kiss? Almost to the point of suffocation. It was only then that Tyrant lifted her head reluctantly. Looking at the silver thread that connected their lips, Tyrant's face flushed red in an instant. Bastard! Why didn't you dodge? Tyrant scolded. Chapter 1083. At this moment, Duque was possessed by the best actor. At this moment, Stephen Chow and Duque were together. Even though it was not a complete lie, Duque still decided to use this nuclear bomb level line and changed it. Once, the goddess of fate placed a strange but sincere love in front of me, and I could not cherish it. In the 10,000 years that I spent in the river of time, I spent every day and night in regret. This is the most painful thing in the world. Since the heavens have given me a chance to reunite after 10,000 years, even if I die at the hands of that woman, I will say, I'm sorry, but I love you. Bastard, how can I hate you when you're like this? Tyrant's tear ducts burst. Because she was on top and he was on the bottom, her bead-like tears washed Duque's face. Duque smiled bitterly and touched the side of Tyrant's face. He comforted her gently. It's okay, I'm back now, right? Sob, sob, sob. I'm so touched. I don't hate you anymore. Hearing the crying from next door, Duque felt a little awkward. Who the hell are you? Why are you crying too? Tyrant was so angry that she laughed and turned her head. Chandris. This has nothing to do with you. I'll deal with you for imprisoning Duque later. Duque was dumbfounded. I'm sorry, she's Chandris, my adopted daughter during the ancient war. Sigh. I can't even get rid of her. Sigh. I shouldn't have spoiled this little girl. Please. I'm over 10,000 years old. Chandris grimaced. Duque wanted to facepalm. Of course he knew who Chandris Feathermoon was. After the cataclysm, the Feathermoon's stronghold was on land, and a troublesome hunter kited it to Orgrimmar. He wanted to see a good show where the leader of the Horde defeated the leader of the Alliance, but he failed. Brainless Howl and Gammer lost to her in single combat. The most overpowered thing was that she had inherited Tyrant's, Starfall, and Prayer of the Moonlight Goddess, which allowed her to attack the entire screen. He was definitely one of the fiercest leaders in the Alliance. However, this guy was still a one-sided love, and he had been single for 10,000 years. Yes, the one who had a crush on her was Maev Shadowsong's younger brother, Jared Shadowsong, the de facto leader of the Allied army. Since Tyrant had pointed out Chandris's name, Duque had a general idea of what was going on. This was the gushing spring lake of Teldrassil, a giant island in the middle of the sea where only the night elves lived. For some reason, when he transmigrated back to this world, he was discovered by Chandris, who hated him for abandoning Tyrant. If not for Tyrant's arrival, it would have been a melodramatic scene. Now, it could be considered a pass. The house had been destroyed by Tyrant's, Starfall, and such a huge commotion could not be hidden from the people nearby. After Tyrant sent Chandris to clean up the mess outside, Duque and Tyrant finally went to a room belonging to the Alun sisters to have a good chat. Duque was eager to know what had happened while he was away. Duke, who was the first to enter, was dumbfounded. He cursed on the spot, holy *T. Resentment. Soaring resentment. Thousands of bananas, like dried meat, were hung on the four walls with their eyes wide open. These dried bananas looked like specimens that had lost all their moisture, but still maintained their bright yellow color. They were arranged neatly from floor to ceiling on the 4-meter-tall wall. I suddenly remembered that I have something urgent to attend to. Duque turned around and left. Unfortunately, it was too late. Tyrant still had the holy smile of a high priestess on her face, but her actions were not holy at all. Sister, why are you taking off your equipment if not to run faster in the dungeon? Although he was shocked, Duque's pair of shifty eyes could not move away. Ha! You didn't even want to tell me your real name back then. In the end, 10,000 years later, when your lover found me and told me that you had gone to the ancient war, I found out that Duque was Duque. May I ask, dear Mr. Duque, what urgent matter is more important than catching up? The world of Azeroth is still waiting for me to save it, Duque said with his head held high. If it wasn't for the fact that you have protected the world of Azeroth for 10,000 years, do you think I would wait for you like an idiot for 10,000 years? Duque clenched his teeth and instinctively took a step back. As he did so, he fell to the ground. Tyrant, we are both people of status. Don't get physical. If you have something to say, let's talk. Fine. So what if I use my mouth to convince you? Tyrant put her hands behind her back, but she did not stop walking. She approached him step by step. At that moment, Duque finally understood what it meant to fall into one's own trap. Back then, when the 7 great sins broke out, he had given Tyrant 10 terabytes of information. Now, retribution had come. Duque looked at the lingering bananas and finally broke down. Don't scare me. I actually have a weak heart. Tyrant did not say anything. One look from her made Duque's blood flow become uneven. Scream then. Scream then. Here, no one will hear you even if you scream your lungs out. Tyrant used the words that Duque had given her all those years ago. She almost angered Duque to death. Duque was quite strong-willed. When he realized that he would be stabbed no matter what he did, his temper flared up. He put his hands on his waist and laughed out loud. Ha! Tyrant! Have you forgotten? You haven't beaten me even once. Do you still remember the terror of being controlled by Duque's godly sword? Sorry. A certain lover was too unqualified and didn't come for 10,000 years, so I've long forgotten. With that, Tyrant launched an attack. How terrifying was 10,000 years of resentment. One could tell from Duque's pitiful howl. No, don't stop. This battle would later be called the Battle of 10,000 Years by the two of them. This battle was truly earth-shattering and earth-shattering. With the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza's blessing of life, countless warriors were quickly duplicated. Billions of soldiers bravely sacrificed their lives for the sake of righteousness. In Duque's mind, this battle was also called the Clone War. Duque came back to his senses, and the first thing he did was to set those banana lords on fire and expiate them. This thing was simply ominous. Of course, what made Duque's head hurt the most was the news that Tyrant told him. What? It's been 20 years since the Dark Portal? Tyrant said faintly, yes. We agreed to wait for 10,000 years, but you're 20 years late. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.